What's going on, everybody? Good to see y'all. Let's turn down that music a little bit. The Harris Heller Stream Beats playlist it took a surprising turn on me. I'm like, what is happening right now? Let's see if I'm missing anything real quick. It is good to see everybody. We're about to get started. Thanks for watching. Take off the headset. Boom. All right. I'm a little bit zoomed out. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit more. Boop. There we go. Hi there, everybody. So we have a lot of news to cover off on this week. My microphone seems a little loose. Terrible Mighty, good to see you. It has been a long time. So this week, and Cam, good to see you too. This week we have a lot to talk about. There's a petition over in the UK that is basically trying to get people to sign up for game publishers to stop deleting online games that don't necessarily need that to happen. We are, of course, going to talk about the Bungie story. Bungie laid off more people, and unfortunately, I do think that that is going to continue. I was laughing, not at the layoffs. I wasn't laughing at that. I was laughing at Phil Aroni asking for the weekly shrimp check-in. Shrimps are doing good, Phil. Thanks for stopping by. Speaking of, still got your name on here from last week. I always forget the board. Anybody who leaves a super chat, I always read your super chats, and I'm just getting the board ready for this stream. I'll just put it over here now. Thanks for watching, everybody. Yeah, usually I like to wait until there's about 100 people watching, and then I sort of get the show going. I do stream over at twitch.tv/Destin if you prefer to watch on Twitch, and I stream, of course, on youtube.com/the channel. Now, a lot has happened this week, so we're going to talk about the petitions, we're going to talk about the Bungie thing, and also a bit of a surprising conversation popped up about Xbox hardware that is on the forefront of my mind. Now, if you remember, Xbox hardware has not been doing great. They just slashed their they've already said that they're going to see another hardware decline in Q4, and we had so they've already said that for the next quarter, they're yet again going to slash their predictions for where it's going to be. And a clip from Unlocked started making the rounds where I basically said console hardware isn't doing it. And I don't know how else to say this, but there was a whole lot of cope and just denial about the fact that hardware is selling poorly. And I think there's this weird correlation that people make. Like if I say that Xbox hardware is not selling well, it's not a defensible statement. It's not selling well. Amy Hood has already told us that after the 42% decline in sales year over year, that next year we're also going to see another decline in sales. So yes, revenue and services are up. A lot of the other areas are up, but something is going on with console hardware. And this is true for Microsoft. This is true for PlayStation. This is true for Nintendo, who is also at the end of their life cycle. And I do wonder if new hardware launching next year for, Nintendo or whoever else, I do wonder if we're ever going to see the kind of numbers that we used to see in the past with hardware sales. I think we've sort of hit a saturation point with how much people are willing to spend on their hardware. And we're seeing it very clearly with Xbox, who is having a very difficult time selling their units. And they're raising the prices of consoles. Both PlayStation and Xbox did this. They had to raise the price of their hardware everywhere in the world. Microsoft just recently increased the price of their Xbox Series X in Japan again, because the market, just generally speaking, it's really not in a good place right now. The American dollar is worth less in other territories. The Japanese yen is not doing great. It's problematic. So while this is on the forefront of my mind, let's just look at some of the tweets that I made. So just a reminder, since my take from Unlocked is making the rounds, I basically said, I don't know how it makes business sense for Microsoft to keep investing in hardware the way that they always have. Sarah Bond is out there talking about the most powerful Xbox ever made, and I just don't think that does it for people right now. The best-selling console is an underpriced piece of or underpowered piece of hardware in the form of the Nintendo Switch. And it's on track to potentially beat the PlayStation 2. Now, the PlayStation 5 had a very strong start. They've slashed their hardware their hardware sales projections, and even that one's having a tough time to sell. And when you actually look at where Xbox is currently with the Xbox Series X, it's not pacing great. We have numbers from Statista. I don't trust, everybody links to VG charts. I'll never trust VG charts. They have been wrong too many times, and everybody keeps referencing them. I just don't reference that site, so I've seen the numbers there. We're going to go with other sources that have a more concrete stat analogy. I forget that my thing covers this up. So let's open this image up, and I'll open this image up. So long story short, the Xbox Series X and S have sold 27.7 million units as of February 2024. I believe that's the last official number that we have. And the Xbox One lifetime sales were 57 million. So we're about, what, four years plus into the Xbox Series X and S hardware cycle. And I'm starting to question if the Xbox Series X and S are on pace to even sell what the Xbox One did. And the reason that's problematic is because the Xbox One was widely panned, almost, I wouldn't say universally disliked, because obviously I had an Xbox One. I really like the Xbox One X, but it certainly seems like the Xbox Series X and S might not even hit the same sales figures that the Xbox One did, especially when you're slashing your sales predictions by 42%. What was really telling was at the end of the call during their last financial hearing, they said the following, and I just brought up the transcript, right? So we're going to read through it, and I just sort of want to talk about what this says to me when I read this. Hi, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to ask the question. I actually wanted to veer towards gaming if I could for a second. Xbox Content Services revenue grew 61%. That is great. 58 points help from Activision. That is about 3 points of growth. How should investors think about the long-term growth potential? In this area, you've made significant investments, including the Activision deal, but how should investors be thinking about the growth potential of the gaming, or what are the puts and takes to help make considerations here? Thank you. Satya Nadella said the following. Yeah, for us, our investment in gaming fundamentally was to have, past tense, I'd say the right portfolio of both what we love about gaming and always have loved about gaming, which is Xbox and the content for the console, and expand from there so that we have content for everywhere people play games, starting with the PC. When I think about the Activision portfolio, it comes with great assets for us to cover both the PC and the console. And then, of course, assets to cover mobile sockets, which we never had. We feel that now we have both the content and the ability to access all the traditional high-scale platforms where people play games, which is the console, PC, and mobile. But we're also excited about the new sockets, right? I mean, the fact that even in this last quarter, we expanded xCloud to Amazon TV. He forgot the name of it or whatever. It helps us reach new gamers or the same gamer everywhere they want to play. And that ultimately will show up in that software plus services and transaction revenue for us, which is really our long-term KPI. Their long-term KPI is software plus services and transactional revenue. It's not in hardware. They see the declines anyway. And that's what we're building towards. And that was this strategy behind Activision as an asset. Amy, if you wanted to add to it, and I think Amy's statement is even more towards the idea of less of a focus on hardware and more on software and services, which is fine, by the way. I want to make one thing clear. The idea that the Xbox Series X and S hardware is not selling well, it doesn't mean Xbox is doing badly. It doesn't mean they're dying. But if you're a hardware fan, you got to start wondering, is Xbox going to continue investing in hardware after whatever this thing is that Sarah Bond has been teasing? I don't know how it continues to make business sense. And we look at how far cloud has come. Are they going to change their strategy drastically? At what point does it no longer make sense to continue making hardware? If they sell fewer Xbox Series X and S units than they did on the Xbox One, like if it goes down instead of up, isn't that concerning to you as an Xbox fan? Because as a business for Microsoft and Xbox, that means, do we keep investing in hardware? Let's continue on. Here's what Amy Hood said. No, I do think the real goal here is to be able to take a broad set of content to more users in more places and really build what looks more like to us a software annuity and subscription business with enhanced transactions and the ownership of IP, which is quite valuable long term. And Satya mentioned things where the ownership of IP, it can be monetized in multiple ways. And I think we're really encouraging some of the progress and how we're making progress with Game Pass, as well as some of the new announcements. Thank you, Keith. Nothing about hardware, nothing about making a new console in this call. They did mention the console, but it's very clear what their strategy is. They've never cared where you play. We all know that. But if you are a hardware fan, look at the last few quarters and how they've done. It was a 32% decline, I believe. It was a 30-something% decline year over year for the last investor call. It's a 42% decline year over year at this call, and they've already said, hey, expect next time that we're going to see another decline in hardware year over year. You're talking about the world's most powerful console, the Xbox Series X, potentially not selling as many units as the Xbox One did, which Xbox fully admits was the year to lose. They lost to the PS4. They got trounced. That affects mindshare, etc. JJ says, hi, Des, and I enjoy your work. Watching from Florida during tropical storm. Please be safe if you're watching during a storm. A CNBC video on why Xbox failed in Japan can tell more too. Yeah, so Xbox trying to get a foothold in Japan. They had a good headwind at the beginning of that, and then they raised the console prices. So it's concerning to me as a fan to look at these numbers and say these things, and then they see the pushback from fans who talk about the things that, look, we all know software and services is increasing, but do you like the Xbox, the actual physical hardware, or do you not care about that? Because that's what I'm focusing in on. I'm not talking about Xbox as a business. I'm not talking about Microsoft's gaming division. I'm talking specifically about the hardware, and the hardware is failing. It is not meeting expectations. That's problematic, especially if you want to see them succeed. So I posted this, and just the reaction is so bizarre to me. Please stop preaching to the lowest common denominator by banging on about consoles. Stop. They no longer matter next to software sales and subscription, with Microsoft was dominating in even before the acquisition of Activision Blizzard. I'm like, they matter if you want Xbox to keep making consoles. So like, yeah, that's the whole thing. We're going to get to the PlayStation news. I don't know why Boss Red is frustrated, because it's a live stream, Boss Red. Buckle in, because we're going to go on a ride. And if you actually read the description, I said I was going to talk about this. So get as mad as you want in chat, but like, come on. Thank you for the tip, by the way. JJ saying $4.99. I'll put you on the board. I do appreciate everybody watching. And this is a conversation. If you have any thoughts on this, like, am I wrong that it doesn't make business sense to invest in selling fewer consoles year over year? Console matters, hardware matters. With no hardware, there is no software. Yes, every part of it matters. And that's why I'm saying this is concerning. I do think, I will say this, I do think if Xbox were to go ahead and do something drastic, like make a handheld, I do think that that would be a smart strategy given the current hardware situation. I don't think marketing and releasing the world's most powerful console and all of that stuff, like, I just don't know how that moves the needle in a positive direction. I think most people in chat, if you're in chat, do you care about the console? Like, do you want more Xbox? I'm going to make a poll right now. Do you want Xbox to keep making consoles? Yes or no? Very simple poll, not leading. Like, obviously, I think the overwhelming response is going to be yes. And if your answer is no, why do you want them to? You don't. If there's no console to make games for, what are they making? They're just going to be a publisher and just make for PlayStation and PC and Nintendo Switch. That's what you want. That's the vision that you have for their future, because that's what's going to happen. If they stop making a platform to sell their games, and granted their profit margin is very high in that realm, what's their path forward? Maxwell says, I really believe that the reason they took day one out of Game Pass standard is to make a tier acceptable for Sony putting it on PS5 and then slowly quit hardware. Sony doesn't like day one. I am very curious to see what Sony ends up doing with Game Pass. They took a staunch stance against it, but the world has changed and everybody's profit margin has changed. AAA is struggling right now. The whole AAA industry is having a really tough time with their budgets. We just saw layoffs at Bungie, and I guess we'll talk about that next to make sure it's balanced out. But everybody was ragging on me for Thank you, Maxwell, for my statement on hardware on Unlocked, and they were all getting mad about it. But it's accurate. And when the CFO and the owner of the company is saying our focus is on subscriptions and annuity, and you have Sarah Bond on the other hand talking about we're going to make the world's most powerful console. I'm like, does that really move units like it used to? The software's not where it needs to be yet. They have a lot of cool stuff coming on the way. They just moved Avowed out of the way, but it is a little bit of a concern, right? Thank you, Casual, for the Twitch Prime sub over on Twitch, by the way. Anyway, would love to hear your thoughts. That's my 2 cents on it. That's why it's concerning. Now, everybody wanted to come here to talk about the Bungie news. That is the headline of the stream. I wanted to talk about the Xbox thing. And just real quick final thought on that. I really hope they do something different. I don't think making the world's most powerful console, you're basically making a PC at this point. And I think a lot of people are just looking at your console where you marketed Starfield running at 30, and that was a whole conversation, right? And now you are raising the price of your product, and it's not working out. I'm not doom and glooming. I'm just saying their hardware isn't selling in a positive way. I don't know how that's doom and gloom. I'm just saying the hardware isn't doing well, and I'm concerned about the future hardware business for the company. How is that doom and gloom? I'm just literally making a statement. You want me to lie to you? Oh yeah, hardware's doing great, you guys. It might not outsell the Xbox One, but here's why that's good. Like, you want me to what do you want me to do? Do you want me to tell you the truth? Nobody's saying they're doomed. Like, I don't know how I can have a conversation about poor hardware sales, which you can look at the numbers and see for yourself. I don't know how me saying that obviously truthful thing equals to Xbox is doomed. It doesn't. They're clearly doing well. They had a 61% in software and services, but the future of what Xbox looks like in the next 5 to 10 years could be vastly different because of how the hardware situation is going to change. I'm not saying Xbox is dead. I'm not saying any of that. And the fact that people are like freaking out because I'm saying that the way Microsoft and Xbox looks in the future is going to be vastly different than it is right now. It's just the truth, you guys. Yes, you are accurate, Metallica. Hardware sales are down for PlayStation, as I stated at the very front of the stream. And I talked about ad nauseum multiple times on Unlocked, and I talked about it on this stream multiple times. And I talked about how the changing economic situation of the world has had an impact. So that doesn't change the outcome of the question, though. How does that make Xbox say we should really invest in hardware right now when components are more expensive than ever before, when our dollar doesn't go as far right now globally, and all of those questions? You guys can call me whatever you want, mustard heart, because I'm stating a fact about the reality of the situation Xbox is in. Like, what are you talking about, Killshot? I'm just saying their hardware sales are down. That's it. And it sucks. So, yeah. Let's talk about PlayStation, because PlayStation had an equally bad week, and Xbox isn't going anywhere. Microsoft isn't going anywhere. I am concerned about their strategies with hardware. And you know what? We'll see in 5 to 10 years. I do think that Xbox still has a chance to do better revenue-wise than PlayStation, because I think fewer and fewer people are as hyped about hardware as they used to be. And that's just the truth of the situation. I think the whole gaming landscape is going to drastically change in the next 5 to 10 years. I do think, well, here, you want me to say something positive about Microsoft? They are at the forefront of cloud streaming technology. It is like a sliver right now. Mobile is going to catch up. Mobile is going to catch up to everybody, and you're going to be able to just plug it into your TV. You can already do it now. And I think just what it looks like is going to change. And I've thought that for like a few years now. I've thought that for a few years now, that it is going to change. But let's move on to PlayStation's terrible week. So if you haven't heard, PlayStation bought Bungie for a couple $2 billion, and Bungie had layoffs in October, and now they're having more layoffs, and they talked about the new path for Bungie. A new path for Bungie from Pete Parsons. This morning, I'm sharing with all of you some of the most difficult changes we've had to make as a studio. Due to the rising cost of development and industry shifts, as well as enduring economic conditions, it has become clear that we need to make substantial changes to our cost structure and focus development efforts entirely on Destiny and Marathon. That means beginning today, 220 of our roles will be eliminated, representing roughly 17% of our studio's workforce. These actions will affect every level of the company, including most of our executive and senior roles. And just a quick note on that, that includes Mark Noseworthy and Luke Smith, who have basically been at the top of the Destiny franchise for a very long time. And it's very concerning to see that they're gone, as well as most of the names that you would recognize, people that helped with the excellent storytelling within the Final Shape, one of the best expansions Bungie has had in years. However, it sold either equal or less than Lightfall, which is obviously really concerning. We did have a super chat, so just really quick from Teapot Fever says Destin Sarabon should just replace P3, to be honest. I don't think Phil Spencer and the hardware situation are really correlated to anybody needing to be replaced. But I know I've seen a lot of people be tough on Phil out of all people. And that's sort of how it goes. When you're at the top, leadership is the one that gets the blame. And I think Phil would agree with that. And Pete Parsons apparently doesn't think that, as we get back to this. These actions will affect every level of the company, including most of our executive and senior roles. Pete Parsons is still there, but 220 people aren't. QA is basically decimated. Storytelling is decimated. The music group is decimated. Their incubation project had to fold over and end up going under PlayStation. They were able to save 155 of their roles. Here's what he continues on to say. Today is a difficult and painful day, especially for our departing colleagues, all of which have made important and valuable contributions to Bungie. Our goal is to support them with the utmost care and respect. For everyone affected by this job reduction, we will be offering a generous exit package, including severance, bonus, and health coverage. I realize all of this hard news, especially following the success we have seen with the Final Shape. But as we've navigated the broader economic realities over the last year, and after exhausting all other mitigation options, this has become a necessary decision to refocus our studio and our business with more realistic goals and viable financials. Pete Parsons is the one responsible for projecting 45% over what they were able to make. The company was on the verge of insolvency, as what reports are saying. And I mean, it sounds more and more like Sony was sold a bad bill of goods. The one person who pointed this out was Michael Pachter, who said they vastly overpaid. Real quick, got a few more super chats here. T-Pop says, Microsoft sells more consoles than your wife's cookies. Okay. I don't really know how to react to that. We don't sell the cookies anymore, but okay. I'll take your $2. Thanks, T-Pop. And TG says, great reporting as always. Much love from Germany. Thank you so much, TG. I really do appreciate it. I don't really get the cookie thing. I think it was supposed to be an insult, but it doesn't really make any sense. You also have no idea how many cookies we sold. Anyway, continuing on. I realize all of this is hard news, especially following the success we have seen with the Final Shape. But as we've navigated, we covered that one. We are committing to 2 other major changes today that we believe will support our focus, leverage Sony's strengths, and create new opportunities for Bungie talent. First, we are deepening our integration with Sony Interactive Entertainment, working to integrate 155 of our roles, roughly 12% into SIE over the next few quarters. SIE has worked tirelessly with us to identify roles for as many of our people as possible, enabling us together to save a great deal of talent that would otherwise have been affected by the reduction in force. I am glad that they were able to save some people at the company and put them over at SIE. But I think at the same time, we are seeing the death of Bungie as we knew it. There's been a lot of reports that Herman Hulst is already in the process of taking over the company, and it makes you really sad. You know, it's really unfortunate. I love Bungie. Bungie's Halo 3 release was my first foray into gaming. I believe at that point they were still owned by Microsoft. And it's really interesting, you know, under Microsoft, they're like, oh, it was so terrible under Xbox. And then under Activision, they're like, oh, we're so glad to be free from Activision. And now they're under PlayStation. It's like, oops, maybe it was leadership the whole time and not these other companies that were problematic. You know, I think at some point you have to look at your own decision making and just say, maybe the buck does stop with Pete Parsons. Like, been there 20 years. They were ready to be insolvent. PlayStation is clearly unhappy, saying, you know, we need to see some accountability. Apparently these layoffs were in the works back in October when they did the first round of layoffs. And I don't think that we're done seeing layoffs. I think there's going to be more. Yeah, exactly. R. Russell says, you know, nobody likes calling for somebody's job, but when you're the lead, when you're Pete Parsons, the buck stops with you. You should be the one taking the brunt of this, not the workers. And there's all these stories about how Pete Parsons just bought $2.5 million worth of cars. Let's say $1 million. That's 10 jobs. That's 10 jobs at $100,000 a year. But like, they all got paid out their big bonuses. It's really, really depressing. It's really depressing to see. This will be a time of tremendous change for our studio. Let's unpack how we ended up in this position. It's important to understand how we got here. For over 5 years, it has been our goal to ship games in 3 enduring global franchises. To that ambition, we set up several incubation projects, each seated with senior development leaders from our existing teams. We eventually realized that this model stretched our talent too thin too quickly. It also forced our studio support structures to scale to a large level than we could realistically support, given our 2 primary products in development, Destiny and Marathon. There's stories that they had spaces for leadership, like condos for leadership to stay at so that they could be closer to work. There's stories about opening studios that were like 15 minutes away from the existing studio and then shutting them down shortly after. Like, there's just stories about rampant expenditures that seem unnecessary in hindsight and problematic. Additionally, in 2023, our rapid expansion ran headlong into a broad economic slowdown, a sharp downturn in the games industry, our quality miss with Destiny 2 Lightfall, and the need to give both the final shape and Marathon the time needed to ensure both projects deliver at the quality our players expect and deserve. We were overly ambitious, our financial safety margins were subsequently exceeded, and we began running in the red. Part of the reason is because they had a 45% revenue miss. Bungie said that they would make 45% more money than they actually did. You don't miss by almost half. Like, something misleading was happening there, and it's insane to me that this is happening. Bungie's clearly not happy about this. Brian says, T-Pop is jealous of your beautiful and talented wife. My wife is beautiful and talented. You are correct. Thank you, Brian. My wife is great. Love her very much. As a result, today we must say goodbye to incredible talent, colleagues, and friends. This will be a challenging time at Bungie, and we'll need to help our team navigate these changes in the weeks and months ahead. This will be a hard week, and we know that our team will need time to process, to ask questions, and to absorb this news. Today and over the next several weeks, we will host team meetings and town halls, team breakout sessions, and private individual sessions to ensure we are keeping our communication open and transparent. Bungie will continue to make great games. We still have over 850 team members building Destiny and Marathon, and we will continue to build amazing experiences that exceed our players' expectations. There will be a time to talk about our goals and projects, but today is not that day. Today, our focus is on supporting our people. I mean, they did the same thing last October, and Pete Parsons is quoted as saying, well, we have the right people now. to make the game that we need to make. And then they laid off more people now here in August. It's tone deaf to be inviting people to go see your cars, knowing 2 days later you're going to be having vast layoffs. It's just absolutely insane and out of touch to see a leader act in this manner, knowing that layoffs are looming. And the reports are saying that these layoffs were planned months before this happened. Bungie messed up worse than they have ever messed up. I've never seen it this bad. And check this out. They got community noted on their social media post. This morning, we shared an important update with the Bungie team on the difficult decision. And I'm in the community notes thing. It says 450 is the estimated total reduction in staff from 1,300. 220 is 17% of 1,294 to 850 as indicated in the article. We still have 850. This represents a 34.6% total reduction in studio size. You have a 45% revenue miss and you reduce your studio by 34.6 total size. That's just since October. I don't know what Bungie is going to do with Destiny going forward when you have let go of this many people. Everybody's calling for Pete Parsons to step down, and it's insane to just see. XBioWolf says, thank you for the news you give and the work you do for us. First time I get to watch live as I work third shift. I love the content. Keep up the great work. Hope family is doing great. Hey, thank you so much for leaving a chat. I really do appreciate the positive messaging. It's just absolutely disconnected. Paul Tassi has a good collection of everything that we've sort of learned over the last few days. And I want to talk about what Destiny is going to look like going forward because it's not good. I absolutely despise the Forbes website, so I apologize in advance. Is there like is there a way I can trick it to not looking like garbage? Give me 1 second here. I'm going to see if I can make it not look like crap. Oh boy. All right, well, I tried to trick it and it cleaned up a little bit. So further clarity on Destiny 2 Frontiers, Destiny 3, and the state of Bungie. So this gives us a little bit of insight into what Destiny is going to be like going forward. For future Destiny plans, the larger content packs, though not true expansions, will contain familiar elements like new destinations, raids, and campaigns, just much smaller scale on the whole, Shadowkeep-ish sized, maybe, though not that same format. The goal is developing more replayable, unique activities like the coil. I did not like the coil. If we are leaving the system, my speculation, this is where we'd see those new worlds to visit. I am not sure if this is free. That will be the main release of a given year, I believe, starting with Frontiers launch, and then 6 months later, there will be another pack of smaller content. That's something along the lines of what we got with Into the Light. This should be free. Into the Light was like one story mission, basically, that you would go through in like an hour. And I just don't know how this is interesting or compelling content release. Between these, there may be something akin to current episodes, though the scale and schedule is not clear. Generally speaking, the idea is less sprawling one-off campaigns and a greater focus on replayable activities, the hobby aspects with the new Frontiers format. There aren't widespread updates that will hit every facet of the game at once, like most expansions used to. It will be less than players are used to, not to say there will not be things worth playing. Here's why that's problematic. They just released one of their best expansions and they almost hit the same concurrence as they did with Lightfall. The problem was they hyped people up so hard for Lightfall, and Lightfall was such a colossal miss that trust is just completely gone. I am really bummed about the state of Bungie and the future of Bungie. It just feels like it's over. It feels like the big swan song was the final shape, and it was a wonderful send off. And honestly, I almost don't really want to hear anymore about the Destiny universe after the final shape. And knowing that they just let so many people go, including the leaders that crafted this world and crafted this game, like I don't even really know who's left, who was involved with creating these original worlds. It's a big bummer. Now, in addition to that, the Destiny 3, not Destiny 3 project was called Payback, and it was going to be a spinoff. Some elements of Payback seem to be shaping up well. The third-person adventure spin-off shooter Luke and Mark were doing, I have not heard anyone say it was a flat-out bad idea or terrible in practice, even if the concept sounded like a significant departure for the series. The idea was that it would be like third-person and you'd play as like known heroes from the universe and go on adventures and stories. That's what Mark and Luke were working on, and it's just dead. Have heard multiple people say that of all projects, Gummy Bears was seemed the most promising. The game that is going over to Sony under the new team. It has MOBA and Smash Bros. Fighting game elements and is supposed to be very fun. Destiny 3 was and is considered too big of a risk in the current market. The idea was instead to split up Destiny as an IP into more manageable components. The PvE portion we have now continuing in D2, Payback for an adventure genre expansion, a mobile Destiny game from NetEase, and spinning out a separate 3v3 Crucible game channeling Trials. It appears none of this is happening now, alongside Destiny 3 never being in production in the first place. There are no plans to just shutter Destiny, however, and long-term rebranding remains unclear, but it's D2 Frontiers content only for the indefinite future, and Marathon remains the big thing right now going into 2025. Here's what I've heard about Marathon. I've heard that Marathon is make or break for Bungie, and I just don't see it happening. I love Bungie. I love the games that they've created. I have thousands of hours, in Destiny 2 and Destiny 1 combined. I have no clue how you release Marathon, which has now been pivoted to a hero shooter in this current market, and see it be a smash breakout success. You're saying that the final shape, which has 50,000 concurrents right now, was not good enough. You're going to release Marathon and you think it's going to match or exceed where Destiny is? How? And if you look at, let's go to Steam charts, SteamDB. Let's go to Steam charts and look where Destiny currently is. It like never leaves the top 25. It never leaves the top 25. So like, look at these games. These are the most played games at this very moment, right? Destiny is on this list, probably in the top 20. Oh, it fell to number 30. So look at where this game is. There's 53,000 people playing the game right now, and it's not good enough for Bungie. It's not good enough for PlayStation. It's just not cutting it. So in what world does Marathon have a chance to go up against Destiny? Like, look at it. Let's do the max. So like, this is the release of Lightfall back in 2023. I believe that's the Lightfall release, 316,000 concurrents, and it held through March, but then it fell off a cliff, but it was maintaining at its lowest point, like 50 to 70. And here we are with Lightfall. Started very, very strong. Everybody like myself beat the game by July. You went to 1/3 the players, and right now you're hovering around 50K. Because there's not really anything left to do. Everybody's done all the raids. Everyone's done all the chases. You know, how does Marathon have a chance on this? Let's look at SteamDB. Let's look at the top games that Marathon would have to go up against. Counter-Strike 2, million people playing right now. Dota, 621. The Banana Scam game, 384,000. PUBG has 239,000 players right now. Another legacy game that you're going up against. The Source thing, Once Human, 165. Path of Exile 1, legacy game, 163K. GTA 5, 153. Elden Ring, 150. Rust, Baldur's Gate, 7 Days to Die, The First Descendant, Call of Duty, Apex Legends. Apex Legends is at 96K. The market's saturated. I don't know how you enter a market where your other flagship title is around 50K and you're going up against all of these other games that need to do well. And it's a new IP, so it's unproven. Like Halo Infinite. Halo Infinite's averaging like what, 2,000 concurrents right now? I think it's going to be, and I hate to say this, truly, I hate to say this. I think Marathon's going to be an epic miss, and I think it's going to be disastrous. They've spent too much money and they're entering an oversaturated market, especially in the hero shooter genre, I just don't see the path to success. And it's really depressing to say, I want Bungie to be successful. I want to be proven wrong. But like, do you guys see a path to Marathon just being, by the way, we've seen nothing of Marathon. Do you see a path to Marathon being this epic, massive hit for Bungie? Here's what we know. We know it's a hero shooter. We know that it has changed leadership in like the last year. We know it's changed format. There have been play tests that have ranged from I don't really like it to I like it, but nobody's like hyping it up or anything like that. It's very, very concerning for me that all the eggs have been put in the basket of Marathon. One of Destiny's biggest ongoing issues is that its player base is skewing much older than everyone wants to see, which is worrisome to higher ups. You want to attract a younger crowd, and that will desire for new projects like Marathon and Gummy Bears. Another reason as to why no Destiny 3. Bungie internally. Everyone does not trust leadership at all, but leadership does not really seem to understand that. And some actually believe this weekend situation went well, considering the sheer amount of stuff that was done for the final shape was massive. Story was rewritten multiple times. Missions redesigned multiple times. During the delay, they built a colossal amount of new content. Dread, Dual Destiny, the Verity Encounter, exotic class items. Ergo Summit's a weapon that you can get in the game. GM Excision. The reason being is that the studio was told the expansion was make or break, and now they feel all lied to for obvious reasons. Now the new mantra is that Marathon is make or break for the studio. Look, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. You can't fool me twice. That's what the president said, right? That's an old George Bush joke, I think. But it's problematic. Like, how do you trust your leaders when there was a layoff? We found out now that the layoffs were always planned, and now they've hit. The new player onboarding experience remains bad because the team who did the Cosmodrome / Shah Han stuff got one crack at it, and then essentially no one ever tried anything of significance again. That may change with future plans. Bungie is essentially tied to games as a service forever. Nothing single player. Matter was not a live service FPS, so that was part of the reason it was axed. Many departments have been gutted after layoffs. Much of QA is outsourced to people who are unfamiliar with even the basics of the game. The people that are testing the game now don't know how to play the game. Everything has been divided up into strike teams now, even individual missions and activity modifiers. They form, are dissolved, reform. Speculation is that higher ups saw that players liked when they called things strike teams. So now there are 1 million strike teams. What? That's insane. The community liked the term strike teams, so they made a bunch of strike teams. So like, I guess it feels like you're taking action or tackling a problem, but like, wow. Even with updates, many tools are exhausting to use and everything takes forever. And if Destiny 2 content is still being added, there will indeed be more vaulting for technical reasons alone. Though whether the no more expansion content vaulting rules apply is clear. I'm pretty sure everybody who said there will be no more content expansion vaulting, I think they're all gone. Like when things were bad during the pre-final shape layoffs, those that remain are confident in the actual work they're doing and believe they can make great things. They are hoping for community support as they continue to work, which is different than approving of leadership. I, for one, am happy to keep cheering them on. Of course, we'll cheer on the people that are in the trenches making the content. Of course. But when they have everything working against them, at some point, I don't see their path forward to success. When your leader is Pete Parsons. Pete Parsons told me in an interview that is on Bungie, this is when they went independent, by the way, and then sold to Sony like a year later. I want people to come here and do their best work. How can they do their best work? You don't know how to manage your budgets. You overproject by 45%, resulting in sweeping layoffs. How can anybody feel confident in leadership and thereby confident that they can come to work every day and do their best work when they don't know if they're going to get axed after they just busted their butt on the final shape? It's incredibly infuriating to see somebody like that in a leadership position that failed their employees so spectacularly and has seen no repercussions and is instead inviting them to go see their cars. How tone deaf do you have to be? It's very, very frustrating. Bungie and Halo are the reason that I started making video content, and to hear how the employees were treated and just thrown away, it's very disheartening, especially when you've talked to that person. I don't see a path forward. And sure, I'll cheer them on. Like, I want the devs to do well. I'm not going to play Destiny after the episode expansions unless I do for work. But it's just like, the writing is on the wall. When before these layoffs happening, you had like the lead on the final shape leave. You had a writer leave. You had just all these people were already leaving. The PvP lead left. Like, the writing was on the wall. It's really bad. And 343 is like, hey, you can come work over here. At this point, why not? I'm very disheartened by this whole thing. It's just imagine watching your favorite studio crumble, and it's just depressing. Bungie's been my favorite for years. I really do like the people that are at Bungie, most of them, and I have no faith in leadership to lead at that company anymore. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And I don't trust Pete Parsons. I don't trust them to know what they're doing anymore. It's very clear that you've failed them so spectacularly. One person, actually, let's go back to something really quick. I actually had a few other notes that I wanted to bring up about this. I almost forgot. Paul Tassi, he's been covering Destiny for years. He says, I would have said yes a few years ago, but the truth is Destiny views have not been anything of note for a while now. I cover a zillion things, so it's fine. I do feel for those who very much are almost solely reliant on Destiny content in the creator space. It's hard to branch out. And this was in response to Zach, who asked, does Destiny shrinking make you worry about your personal income since you write about it so much? Or is there enough gaming news to cover that you're more or less unbothered? I can only imagine how the Destiny only YouTubers feel right now. Yeah, they're probably pretty upset. There's still going to be Destiny to cover, but that pool has been shrinking for like the last 3 or 4 years. The game has gotten so colossally difficult with the raids that it's hard for a player like myself who did the raid guide for IGN to even find a team, because if you like say the wrong thing or don't have the right gun, they just like won't let you play. It's nutty. It's pretty nutty how catty that community is. Michael Pachter reacted to this acquisition. Remember, this happened when money was cheap back when this acquisition happened. That's why Activision was able to be purchased. You could borrow money for a very low interest rate, and money was able to go further. What ended up happening, though, was Michael Pachter was one of the few people who outlined that Sony vastly overpaid for Bungie. And I just want to bring up the quote here really quick, because here's what he said. The Activision deal and the Zynga deal were both done below those stock recent highs. So Activision had traded over 100 and the deal was at 95. Back in October, it was over 100. Zynga had traded over 11, I believe, and the deal was done at 986. So, they didn't really overpay either of those acquirers. Bungie went for $4 million per developer, and most deals are between $250,000 and $1 million. I've seen deals as close, as high as $2 million per developer. This is crazy talk. And just to compare and contrast, EA bought Respawn about 3 or 4 years ago for $700 million
with 400 developers. And those guys generate 700 million a year in revenue. Bungie does 200 million in revenue. So I think Sony vastly overpaid. I think this was a statement that we're not going to let Microsoft get ahead of us. So we'll just buy something out of desperation. It's not really a deal that makes a whole lot of sense to me. The others do. So what Michael Pachter is outlining here is like, how does this make any sense? If EA bought Respawn for about, what was the math there? 700 million with 400 developers. So it's like 2 or 3 million per developer. And then Sony or Bungie is doing less revenue a year than that. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And he was right. Like, everybody gives Pachter a hard time because like he made a statement about the consoles, but time and time again, I remember quotes that he said, and he is right more often than he is wrong. So like people bring up like the 3 times or whatever that he said something that didn't quite pan out, and they like concatenate important context to it, like, you know, the internet does, but he was dead on with this one. It didn't make sense. And you know who's paying the price? The devs, the people that made the games that we love from Bungie. And that sucks. Don't believe Michael Pachter? How about Microsoft? Microsoft considered acquiring Bungie and Sega to bolster Xbox Game Pass, internal emails show. Microsoft was looking at acquiring both Bungie and Sega, according to internal documents from the FTC versus Microsoft hearing. In an email seen by The Verge, Xbox chief Phil Spencer wrote to both Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella and Microsoft CFO Amy Hood, requesting a strategy approval to approach Sega Sammy over a potential acquisition of its Sega gaming studios. We believe that Sega has built a well-balanced portfolio of games across segments with global geographic appeal and will help us accelerate Xbox Game Pass both on and off console, said Spencer in 2020. What did they say about Bungie? Let's find Bungie. It's not clear what happened with the Sega acquisition and whether Nadella ultimately approved talks, but in a Microsoft internal April 2021 merger review document, Sega was still listed as a key target. Microsoft had identified key areas for acquisition in PC and mobile and console across different markets like Sega, Bungie, Zynga, and IO Interactive. Those were part of the companies. I remember reporting on this. Do you remember this? Bungie, a now Sony-owned studio, was on the list with Microsoft's internal documents stating that the acquisition of Bungie will include securing valuable IP Destiny in its community and integrations of its dev and live ops infrastructure into Xbox game studios. Microsoft had identified a high burn rate risk for Bungie alongside NetEase's 100 million minority stake investment in 2018. It also noted that Destiny was one of the highest hours generating titles on console and Game Pass. They knew that their burn rate was out of whack when they were looking at purchasing them. Yes, there's a lot of positives, but I think Xbox kind of dodged the bullet on this one because Microsoft will be seen as the bad guy here. So they said, your burn rate is insane. We're not going to even approach it. Like, we don't think that buying you is viable right now. Phil Aroni says, I think the damage Bungie has done for Sony is larger than at first glance. I was looking forward to the Last of Us multiplayer game and Twisted Metal. Somehow those got canned after Bungie gave their input. Here's my take on Bungie giving input on the Last of Us factions. Naughty Dog continues to be one of the smartest developers in the market because they said, oh, you want us to make a live service game and that's how much we have to put towards it? Nope, we're out. They would rather eat, let's say they have $100 million of investment time into Last of Us factions, then lose $1 billion. I think they made the right call getting out of the market. They're like, oh, you're missing revenue by 45% with the biggest MMO console shared world shooter on the market. You're missing by 45% of your targets. We're getting the hell out of here. What if the talk with Bungie was actually Bungie showed up and they're like, run away. We're hemorrhaging money. Like, we don't know what the actual conversation was. Thank you, Phil. So instead of looking at it that way, what if the warning was from Bungie, hey, yeah, things are a lot worse than we're making it look like. And that allowed them to make the decision to get out instead of vastly negatively impacting the Naughty Dog developer. I'm kind of glad Bungie gave advice, because maybe their advice was, this isn't a good idea. We're burning through money. So maybe it's for the best at the end of the day. I got one more story again from Paul Tassi over at Forbes. It says, is this the end of Destiny 2? Not quite, not exactly. I do think that it's going to change drastically, but let's hear what he said. On Saturday, I published a piece laying out where Destiny is going from here based on some inside information, expanding on other reporting and extremely vague hints from Bungie itself. The era of massive years of Destiny 2 content is ending. The game itself is not, even as some in the community are acting like the group playing the violin as the Titanic sank. The point is that Destiny 2 is living on, just dramatically changed. And one of the side benefits may be that, well, it should be easier to stay current with, most likely, and possibly cheaper too. The basics of what it's turning into now, we just covered off on this. 2 main releases a year. The first is something akin to an old expansion on a smaller scale. This should include the basics like a new destination, raid, and campaign. But if there is a comparison point, it may harken back to something like Shadowkeep, Destiny 2's smallest mainline expansion. I actually like Shadowkeep. So the fact that he compares it to Shadowkeep, I'm like, I actually really like, I'm one of the few people that enjoyed that expansion. I like the little vignette stories that they did and how they parsed it out in a good way. However, in terms of narrative, this should be when we leave the solar system and explore other worlds. It's unclear if this content is paid or free, though I imagine at the least it would be cheaper than a current expansion, if nothing else. Kids are fighting. Dad radar is going off. The kids are fighting. I hear mom. Okay. Daniel took something away from Nate. It's okay. Let's continue on being mad about video games. The second release would be 6 months later and something akin to Into the Light, a free content drop with a hopefully engaging activity and something meaningful to farm. The success of Into the Light inspired the idea. Between these is the latest unclear, probably 2 pieces of content akin to seasons or episodes, but on that scale, we don't know. There are mentions of temporary events called rallies during this time. I don't know. This gets me not hype for Destiny. It's going to be smaller. I don't know if the story is going to be as good. Like who's left from the lore master team? Like everybody who's worked on story is basically gone. Like the leaders are anyway. Luke and Mark talked about how they want to do it. It's like there's so much potential with the Destiny franchise. It is so unfortunate to see that this is where it's at. Really bums me out. Yeah, so real quick, just a little bit on the side. When you're a dad, I don't know, if there's any dads in chat, anytime my kids are doing something that, like, Nate will jump on the couch and he'll like start jumping on the couch and he's having fun, but I feel my blood pressure going up because I'm like, don't fall off the couch. Don't get hurt. Like, just be careful. Like, you worry so much about every little thing. So if the kids are ever out there and I hear them cry and I don't hear mom, like, I've had to leave the stream or go check on the kids just so I know they're okay and I can relax and get back to video game stuff. But yeah, I don't know, dads. If there's any dads in chat, like, am I the only one that feels that way? Or I have a lot of anxiety as a father. Anyway, we're going to move on to the next story. I didn't mean to. Yeah, your old gaming reflexes become dad reflexes. That's just being a dad. Yeah, okay. So Daniel is 3 going on 4. Nate is 1 going on 2. We're almost at that sweet spot when Daniel's 5 and Nate is 3. That's the sweet spot, y'all. Because, like, Daniel will basically be in school all day, and, like, I'll know he's mostly safe in school, and yeah. Spencer says Marathon, not a hero shooter. It's an extraction. I don't think you heard. All right. Spencer doesn't know the news, y'all. Spencer missed the update about Marathon. So the last report, it looks like, here, I'll go to Destructoid. And here's what was being reported. I don't want to do 3 from Paul. Paul's like the Destiny guy these days. Bungie's Marathon reboot changes leadership and pivots to a hero shooter. This was back in March, right? According to a report from IGN, Bungie's shakeup goes further into more than just Destiny. In a leadership change, Marathon's creative leadership, what the hell? Marathon's creative leadership, specifically game director Chris Barrett, is being replaced by former Valorant director Joe Ziegler. This has been corroborated further by Ziegler's subsequent tweet announcements, where he confirmed that he has been the head of Marathon for the past 9 months. The really curious bit, though, is that the nature of Marathon appears to have changed since Ziegler's taken the reins. According to IGN's report, the new approach for Marathon includes a departure from player-created characters in favor of a selectable cast of heroes. It's a hero shooter now. It changed. And if you look, here's Ziegler. Hey, everyone. Fun update. For the last 9 months, I've been working on Marathon as the game director. We're still baking, but I'm excited to share with you more info. So let's see here. Okay, he hasn't posted anything, thank God, about any changes within his employment. So that's good news. So I'm just looking at a few of the people who he follows. And I'm a little curious. I don't mean to put any of these people on blast. But that was back in March. So obviously he has a lot of friends at Bungie. Here's some of the employees. Tom Farnsworth, senior design lead at Bungie, creative lead in future releases like Destiny the game. Talked about that. This is a good question. Personal vibes. There's a lot of trust we'll need to re-earn as a studio. There's content to ship, comms to commit to, etc. It will be hard. How do we move forward to make our community and former colleagues proud? We'll figure it out. Yeah, it's a tough situation to be on, right? Impact to player support hits hard. These folks walk the walk during the hardest moments of live service, not only with grace, but with passion. They've served the player in all efforts. So Tom still seems to be there, thank goodness. Tocom, I believe, is no longer there. Yeah, he posted about... Is he gone? I actually don't know. Runner team lead. Okay, so I think he's still there. Robbie Stevens is the assistant game director. Still there. Joe Blackburn is not there anymore. He left in September. So Joe's gone. And Hop's still at Bungie. Okay. I haven't really looked into like the people who I've met or interviewed in the past. And I was curious, like, who is still left at Bungie? It does seem like there are a lot of people who are still there, but I haven't like done a deep dive into like the cuts. But I know Mark and Luke are gone. I know Chris Barrett is gone, but he was gone like last year. And it's just unfortunate. Like, I hate to see it. It is nice to see that there are still people there that will have a positive impact. I was going to move over to a story that involves the EU and how there's a big petition to basically stop killing games, right? A new petition needs 1 million signatures to stop publishers killing games. Now, I'm not going to continue on with the story. We're just going to go right to the European Citizens Initiative and discuss what this actually has. Here's what it says. This initiative calls to require publishers that sell or license video games to consumers in the European Union or related features and assets sold for video games they operate to leave said video games in a functional, playable state. Specifically, the initiative seeks to prevent the remote disabling of video games by the publishers before providing reasonable means to continue functioning of said video games without the involvement from the side of the publisher. The initiative does not seek to acquire ownership of said video games, associated intellectual rights, or monetization rights. Neither does it expect the publisher to provide resources for the said video game once they discontinue it, while leaving it in a reasonably functionable, playable state. Now, here's the thing. I do think that this is an important change in how video games are delivered. So much is delivered to us digitally. So much of us is delivered in a way that where it's supposed to be always online. And we're seeing instances where these games are unceremoniously wiped from the internet. You have The Crew recently was removed. I think there's a difference between being able to purchase the Forza games, which you can still buy the physical disc of, but what's that going to look like for Xbox when they go all digital? Like if Hellblade 2 is just removed and you have no way to ever purchase that game again, that game it's just gone. And I think there's a big realization right now that we are losing access to games that we have purchased, and people are upset about that. I think this is an important law. I do hope that something happens with it, because I think there's no reason that a game like The Crew that people purchased could not still be accessible. There's a way that you can just turn off the always online requirement and just let people continue to own that game. That was a good game by all measure. And like, what's going to happen when something like Destiny eventually goes offline? I think there's instances where it's easier. I think Destiny would be harder to make an offline version because of the server infrastructure, or like World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft's going to die someday. Like, I don't know if like even WoW Classic is struggling to keep a player base. Let's continue on reading. Video games have grown into an industry with billions of customers worth hundreds of billions of euros. During this time, a specific business practice in the industry has been slowly emerging that is not only an assault on basic consumer rights, but is destroying the medium itself. An increasing number of publishers are selling video games that are required to connect through the internet to the game publisher or phone home to function. While this is not a problem in itself, when support ends for these types of games, very often publishers simply sever the connection necessary for the game to function, proceed to destroy all working copies of the game, and implement extensive measures to prevent the customer from repairing the game in any way. This practice is effectively robbing customers of their purchases and makes restoration impossible. Besides being an affront on consumer rights, video games themselves are unique creative works like film or music and cannot simply be substituted with another. By destroying them, it represents a creative loss for everyone involved and erases history in ways not possible in other mediums. I think that the EU is absolutely going to step in and make an effective change to the entire video game industry in this respect. I think it's insane that a game like The Crew, which could absolutely be played offline, is simply just deleted from the internet. Just delete it. You can't access it anymore. You can't do anything. There are different cases, like with an MMO or shared world shooter or something like that, where I don't know if it would be as easy for them to make an offline version playable, but there's a little bit of a problem here. There's requirements often that software needs to at one time initiate an online connection to ensure that you're not like pirating copies of the physical media, right? Inversely though, there's nothing to protect the consumer when that goes offline. So you spend $60 on a game and then they can just delete it if they choose to. And I do think that the government will look at this at some point, and they are going to have to make a decision about whether or not this is a reasonable thing to do for consumers. The practice is effectively robbing consumers of their purchases and makes restoration impossible. Besides being an affront to consumer rights, video games themselves are unique creative works. Covered off on that. Existing laws and consumer agencies are ill-prepared to protect consumers against this practice. The ability for a company to destroy an item has already sold to the consumer long after the fact is not something that normally occurs in other industries. With license agreements required to simply run the game, many existing consumer protections are circumvented. This practice challenges the concept of ownership itself, where the customer is left with nothing after buying a game. I think this is like a really, really good petition. If you want to sign this petition, and I'll link to it, only do it if you're in the EU. Do not do it if you're in America. Only do it if it's applicable to your specific region of the world. Because if you just go sign it and you're not affected or applicable in this situation, you could actually do more damage to the potential of this actually getting in front of Congress. But if you agree with what they're saying, and personally, I do think there need to be more consumer protections. This is not an Apple that could go bad after a certain amount of time. This is a video game. So I do think that it's a really interesting topic to be brought up. Bass Digi says, Destin is a little childish. I'm reading an EU law that is potentially being passed in the legislation. And your reaction is that I'm childish because I advocate for consumer rights? Okay. You have your take, I guess. Existing law and consumer agencies, we talked about that one. We wish to invoke Article 17, Part 1, I think that means part, I actually don't know what that symbol means, of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. No one may be deprived of his or her possessions except in the public interest and in the cases and under the conditions provided for by law, subject to fair compensation being paid in good time for their loss. This practice deprives European citizens of their property by making it so they lose access to their product an indeterminate/arbitrary amount of time after the point of sale. We wish to see this remedied at the core of this initiative. Quick super chat here. Herman is running Bungie for now. I hope he brings back OGs and hires Jason Jones as creative officer and Joseph Staten as CEO. Maybe Alex Ropian too. I think Staten is still at Microsoft, but yeah, I'm not sure. Maxwell. Thank you, Max. I would like to see the OG Bungie people come back, but I think a lot of them are so distraught by what's happened that they're just done. We also invoke Title XV, that is 15, of the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union and the following TFEU articles as our justification for and the Union's imperative to respond to the initiative. Article 169 has an obligation to promote the interests of consumers and to ensure a high level of consumer protection to protect the health, safety, and economic interests of consumers. We believe this practice infringes upon or requires correction to be commensurate with the EU's obligation. The actions taken in response to this initiative must supersede and end user license agreements associated with video games. I think there's something that's going to happen with this one. I have to imagine that the idea of protecting consumer rights is very, very big within the world, especially in the EU. Do you remember that when the whole Activision thing was happening, who almost got the whole thing shut down? The EU. Was it the EU or the UK? Well, anyway, point being, this is a territory where they take these things very seriously, where consumer protections are very, very important. So the fact that this is being presented could give them a little bit trouble. And this could have sweeping implications for the US. And it was both, yes. I believe the EU passed it, but the UK didn't, if I remember correctly. But anyway, it was close at both places. It was like never sweeping. Consumer protection requirements shall be taken into account in defending and implementing other union policies and activities. Given that this practice extends across member states and beyond the EU, the union's actions regarding this practice ought to keep consumer protections in mind. The actions taken in response to this initiative must supersede any end user license agreements associated with video games. Basically, they're saying consumers first, Like, yeah, you can put your EULA in there, but like you got to at least say that we're going to have the product for 5 years or something. The commission and its proposals envisaged in paragraph 1 concerning health, safety, environmental protection, and consumer protection will take as a base a high level of protection within their respective powers. The European Parliament and the Council will also seek to achieve this objective. This practice undermines the high level of consumer protection that the Commission, the European Parliament, and the Council takes as the basis of law in the Union, and their objectives of establishing and maintaining the functioning of an internal market as described in one of this article in Article 26. I think if this gets enough attention, I do think that this could be passed. Number of statements of support collected. So they have a lot of support from Austria and Belgium and Bulgaria. Total number of signatories, 125K. So they need 1 million is what the original report said. And this was just registered. I have no idea how to read these dates. Collection start date 7/31. So it just started and they have 125K. I think that this has a chance of making it further than we thought. And I do think it could happen. It's a really tough case to be in though. What is it, Tim? Why wow? Deadline is 7/1/2025. So they have a year. Let me see here. I had a few other stories lined up to discuss today. Okay. Yeah. All right. We're going to talk about another Xbox story. There's this quote going around from a Phantom Blade Zero dev that said nobody needs Xbox. And I kind of want to talk about this because I was looking into this and thinking about talking about it. And the first thing I saw was that this came from Icon Era. And they're kind of getting roasted. Genbox 360 said, Icon Era, check. Anonymous source, check. BS for clicks, check, check, check. Famous last words before it was under 1 million sells and gets closed. So they're making fun of the developer. An opinion by a developers of Phantom Blade Zero who wish to remain anonymous, obviously. Icon Era is an account that posts opinions of their users, mostly PlayStation fans, with the IQ of a doorbell. It's all about pathetic console warring and getting some attention. Pathetic. So like obviously some very strong words here. Yeah. Some very strong words within the thread of what people are talking about here. Let's read the original article. So it's in Portuguese. I'm going to use Google Translate. Obviously, we all know Google Translate often misses nuance and context that is important. So keep that in mind as I'm reading this post. Nobody needs this platform. Black Myth Wukong and Phantom Blade Zero are not PlayStation exclusives, but Xbox versions are not a priority, say developers. Journalists at ChinaJoy were able to speak with representatives from Game Science and S Game Studios, where they addressed the topic of PS5 exclusivity. China recently hosted the largest gaming exhibition, ChinaJoy 2024, where the most interesting new projects from local developers were presented. Apparently, gamers were most interested in dark action games, Black Myth Wukong and Phantom Blade Zero. I will say this, I'm actually excited about both of these games. Super into Black Myth Wukong, very into Phantom Blade Zero. I'm curious about both. Both games were presented at the event on behalf of PlayStation, which caused some discontent among players, which the developers themselves were quick to dispel. The creator of Black Myth Wukong and Phantom Blade Zero stated that they do not have exclusivity agreements with Sony. Journalists present at the ChinaJoy exhibition were able to communicate with representatives of the Game Science and S Game Studios, where they touched on the topic of PS5 exclusivity. According to developers, they are indeed working closely with the PlayStation gaming division. We know all this already so far. Let's continue on. Hey, Chaos Lounge, good to see you. Black Myth Wukong and Phantom Blade Zero do not currently have consoles. We knew this. Let's just see if he commented on any of the other stuff. Yeah, okay. The company provides a comprehensive support in promoting games in China and abroad. In a sense, Sony is the publisher of Black Myth Wukong and Phantom Blade Zero. The author is not. However, this collaboration does not impose any obligations on the teams. The developers independently decide on which platforms they will release their games at the moment on. One of the Phantom Blade Zero developers, who wished to remain anonymous, also stated that PlayStation helps many studios a lot in the testing area. The company provides special debugging tools and even its own engineers. According to him, these employees are also helping with PC optimization along with the PS5 version. I think that's true. I think that would be true if Xbox helped it. But here's the hot take that we got. When asked why his studio doesn't want to release an action game on Xbox, he replied that nobody needs this platform. According to the developer, the console is not popular in Asia, and in addition, Microsoft has created a very overloaded ecosystem that is difficult to develop games for. Black Myth Wukong will be released on August 20th. As for Phantom Blade Zero, it will appear on the PC and PS5. However, it does not have a release date. Some members say that it will not be before 2026. Okay. Two things to talk about here. It's a translation on a Portuguese website that was translated in English. So I imagine if this is at China Joy, let's assume it's in Chinese. The Chinese is being translated into Portuguese. The Portuguese is now being translated by Google Translate into English. So let's take that into account for a second. Let's take that into account for a second and just consider that as we're reading this story. Because here's the problem with all of that. It's like a game of telephone. Are we actually getting the accurate reporting? Or at some point, is this a game of telephone that's gone one step too far? I think maybe like the actual statement, and I'm kind of giving it a little bit of leeway here. We don't need to release on the Xbox platform, and it's difficult to develop for. Like, I think that's a reasonable take because of Xbox's whole, you need to make it for the Xbox Series X, you need to make it for the Xbox Series S also. Like, I imagine some sort of statement like that was made, and it's just the game of telephone, and it's being translated one too many times, and I think the nuance is being missed. In what world would a developer who obviously wants to keep making games just dunk on one of the big publishers? Like, all right, sure. Another website reported as Xbox doesn't have a presence in Asia. I mean, Xbox is not doing great in Japan, especially when they have to raise the prices, and just Asia generally. I know they released their console in China, and it's like their first foray in China, same with PlayStation. But I mean, I could see that being the case for sure. But I think this is a little harsh, and I think it's a mistranslation. But I mean, at the same time, it's not too crazy. Yeah, and if you all look, I'll save you a click, and basically it's the one paragraph. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what to make about it, but it was making the rounds. I think Xbox does need to address one of those criticisms, though. The fact that you have to develop for the Series X and you have to develop for the S, I think that is a challenge that it would seem more and more developers are highlighting as a bit of a difficult problem for developers to tackle. So I do think Xbox should figure out a way to address that. Does every game still need to have parity on the Series S and X? I don't know. I don't know about that. All right, we are going to go through the gamut of Xbox news now. We've talked about the Sony stuff and how that was just catastrophic for PlayStation. We're going to go back to Xbox. We kind of talked about this thing that I saw making the rounds. I think it's a bit of a nothing burger, but yeah, like Phantom Blade Zero, it's coming out in 2026. Okay. And they said they potentially said something that was translated from, I think, Chinese to Portuguese, and then from Portuguese to English. Like, just in the way that the interview would have went, it's too many layers of translation for me to give it a ton of credence in my reaction to it. So is there some truth to the idea that developing for the X and S is somewhat more difficult than expected? Yeah, sure. But quoting it several, like a translation into a translation to a translation, it's like, what dev, especially a small dev, would just say, yeah, F Xbox? I'm more inclined to believe that, right? Because it's just too ludicrous that they would say that to me. So, some big stuff happening. Big news about Xbox at Gamescom. They're going to have 50 games. They're going to have theater presentations for Avowed, Indiana Jones: The Great Circle, and Starfield: The Shattered Space, and more August 21st, 25th. They talked about some of the games that they're going to have there. They're going to have Age of Mythology Retold, Avowed, Our History Untold, Diablo 4 Vessel of Hatred, Diablo Immortal, The Elder Scrolls Online, Fallout 76 Towerborn, and World of Warcraft: The War Within. And there is going to be an Xbox Fan Fest event. They're hosting a special community event to kick off Gamescom. And if you're going, you can use a code to be a part of it. They have a lot planned. They talked about their streaming schedule in the blog post. Let me just bring that up really quick. Their streaming schedule is going to be several days long. And I believe that was near the bottom. So on Wednesday, August 21st, they're going to be talking about Stalker 2, Atomfall, Age of Mythology, and more. That will start at 6 a.m. Pacific and go out throughout the day. Bethesda also has a stream happening. On the Thursday, August 22nd, we're going to be hearing about Star Wars Outlaws, World of Warcraft: The War Within, Towerborn, another Bethesda stream. And on Friday, they're going to be talking about Avowed, Our History Untold, plus others. And there will be another Bethesda stream. I wonder if we're just going to see more about Starfield and what's going on there. But yeah, Aaron Greenberg also talked about Gamescom, hyping it up a little bit. Looking forward to the return to Gamescom. He just sort of recapped what they already said in the press releases, but they said, for those not attending, I'd recommend you check out the Gamescom opening night live show, as well as our Xbox at Gamescom show floor daily broadcast streams. More information here, and I just told you the dates on that. It seems like they are going to have some notable events and announcements at Gamescom. I think we're going to get release dates for Indie. We're going to get release dates for Shattered Space. We already got a confirmed release date for Avowed, which is actually kind of nice. And I am looking forward to whatever else they end up bringing to the event. Phil Spencer actually sort of tweeted about the upcoming calendar, saying, we're proud of what the Obsidian team have accomplished with Avowed the game and want to make sure they have the best launch possible. We look forward to you enjoying it along with the rest of our lineup of games and updates coming this year and beyond. So many games coming. As such, we're moving Avowed to February 18, 2025 to give players backlogs some breathing room. Stay tuned for more from our games across Activision, Blizzard, Bethesda, and Xbox Game Studios at Gamescom, including our August 23rd live stream for a look at Avowed. And then if you look at their calendar, you got World of Warcraft in August, you got Age of Mythology. I think I actually brought up my tweet where I broke down the dates in a easier to read fashion. World of Warcraft, Age of Mythology, Aura, Diablo 4, Call of Duty, Flight Simulator, Stalker. We don't have a date for Starfield. We don't have a date for Towerborn. We don't have a date for Indie. And then Avowed was moved to 2025. Now, Avowed, out of all of these games, the one I'm most curious about, for better or for worse, is Avowed. So I got a lot of flack because I'm like, oh, it's going to be another gap. I guess I'm more speaking for myself because I am curious about this game more than any of the other games. So that's sort of my take on the whole situation. And people seem totally fine with this delay, but this isn't a delay so like the dev can have more time to polish up the game. They are literally saying we are delaying this game because we're releasing too many games this year. So we're moving Avowed to 2025. I would be more thumbs up about it if they were like, we're moving Avowed because it's not ready and the dev needs 4 more months. But it's just a delay because they're like, oh, we have too many games for you to play. I'm like, look, I look at this lineup. You know what Destin's interested in playing? I'm interested in playing Avowed. I'm not too interested in the Diablo expansion. Maybe I'll play Call of Duty. Like, out of all the games, like, I look at the list, I was most curious about Avowed. So for me, that's the one that I was curious about and interested in playing. I might play the new World of Warcraft thing for work. Age of Mythology. I'm going to be honest with y'all. I'm not going to play Age of Mythology. I'm not going to play Aura. Like, they're RTS games. Maybe I'll play them for like an hour, but like, those aren't big ones. I might play the new Diablo season. Travis Northup over at IGN did a preview there. I'm sort of curious about Call of Duty, but it's like, it's Call of Duty again. Flight Simulator, I might play. Indie, I still need to finish the main campaign for Starfield. Little bit of a cool thing though on this chart. We found out that South of Midnight is slated for 2025, and like they're locking that in. Doom the Dark Ages 2025, they're locking that in, and Fable 2025. So all that's good news, and I am excited about that. But I mean, everybody seems not to care about the Avowed delay. I'm a little bummed by it. I've been following it the longest. I've been critical about it. I'm curious about where the game's going to go. I'm just closing all my tabs here to catch up about, to free up, all the RAM that Chrome is eating up. And I am curious about that one the most. Isn't it bad that Avowed got pushed back into 2025, because 2025 is the most stacked gaming year I've seen in the last 10 years? Not Q1 though, Landon. Q1, like normal people Q1, like Microsoft just did their Q4 in July. Doesn't make any sense to me how quarters work in the business world. And like, I think PlayStation is like on, I just don't get the quarters. To me, Q1 would be January through March. April, May, June is Q2. July, August, September is Q3. And then the last few months of the year are Q4, right? Do you think we see a console version of WoW at Gamescom? I think that they should announce Game Pass WoW subscriptions at Gamescom, or some version of World of Warcraft on Game Pass. They already gave a date for Avowed in 2025. Yeah, February 18th. I literally just read it 2 seconds ago. But you are correct. I don't really know where to fit this in. So Game Informer randomly shut down. This was very abrupt in the middle of the month. The final level, farewell from Game Informer. After 33 thrilling years of bringing you the latest news, reviews, and insights from the ever-evolving world of gaming, it is with a heavy heart that we announce the closure of Game Informer. From the early days of pixelated adventures to today's immersive virtual realms, we've been honored to share this incredible journey with you, our loyal readers. While our presses may stop, the passion for gaming that we've cultivated together will continue to live on. Thank you for being part of our epic quest, and may your own gaming adventures never end. They literally just took the website offline and made this page. So like, you don't get a redirect. It's just dead. It's just disappeared. I think it's crazy. And honestly, I think of all the news outlets out there, I think Game Informer was one of the good ones. I think they did good reporting. I think they had fun with how they presented gaming stories and gaming news to the audience. I really liked their interviews that they would do during preview events. And I think that was Yoetzi on Twitter. He like spun off and did his own thing a few years back. And it's a huge bummer. I think they did really, really good work over at Game Informer. And the idea that the journalism sector is shrinking, I don't think that's a good thing. I think Game Informer was one of the ones that they could have sold it. They could have sold it for like cheap and allowed it to continue to thrive. Like, obviously people are out there right now shopping out their sites. Like, nobody, you're telling me nobody would have bought Game Informer? Really? I can't think of a controversy they were ever caught up in. I just think they were a really solid reporting outlet. Their covers were great. I really liked how they pushed forward the digital magazine, and it was really, really neat. It's just so unfortunate to see. Paul Tassi, I reference Paul because he's a friend, but he says, wait, they actually nuked GameInformer.com itself? All their work gone? Evil. Yeah, it's just all gone. There were a bunch of people online trying to get together and like use Wayback Machine or whatever to pull Game Informer. It really sucks. And like who's around these days? It's like IGN, it's Kotaku, it's GameSpot, and it bums me out a little bit. Like, I think when I started in the industry, I just celebrated 13 years at IGN. 13 years. The market has changed so drastically since I started there. But, you know, the core tenets of what I do, it's always been, how can I provide a fun, cool service for you? What can I make that will entice the viewer to interact with it? Early on in my career, I did IGN Versus, and like that allowed you to have a voice within IGN where you would vote on the IP that you like the most. And I really like being able to do that. We did How Scary Is, which was like presenting a bunch of different types of reactions in a fun way to the audience. And I'm always in my head, I'm like, can I make something funny? Can I make something that the audience likes? And like a big thing on this YouTube channel is people really seem to gravitate towards a more grounded presentation style of me just like reading the news and having a personal reaction to it. So you can decide if you like or hate me or whatever. And you get to read the story along with me. And I'm sitting here talking with you about the news. Like there's 340 of you watching right now. Have you enjoyed how I've pivoted my personal channel to differentiate from the IGN style stuff that I do? I think I've done a pretty good job of differentiating them in a meaningful way. And I really like doing these streams and stuff. I know sometimes I get a little flaky with my posting strategies, but you know, you get sick or you got kids or anything, but I hope you like this style. And I do wonder what the future of the market looks like. You know, Carolina, thank you for the $2. Q1 Avowed, South of Midnight, Doom, Fable. I like that slate. I do like that slate. Yeah, see, people like this. And you know what's really interesting? I've made it no secret. I watch a lot of Asmongold. I think it's important to watch voices that you don't necessarily agree with. And some people like don't like his takes and they don't like his style, but like we're seeing all of these spinoffs and these people that are having these more direct conversations, for better, for worse. Like, of course you're not always going to agree with me, and that's totally fine. I don't mind having a disagreement. I just don't like it when the attacks get personal, you know, it just seems totally unnecessary. So I am very grateful that you guys watch me, and just wanted to say, just as an aside, thank you. And I'm bummed about Game Informer at the same time. JT says, for anyone who wants to help, MinMax Discord is trying to preserve as much GI. Yeah, so JT actually knows what's up with that. Yeah, so it's the MinMax, and those are, I believe that is former GI people. That's MinMax is part of that group, I believe, is the guy who used to do those interviews that I really liked from Game Informer. Snap Blast Play, very interested to see what Xbox does next in relation to hardware. I think they need to nail what Xbox is next gen. I agree, Snap Blast. I think that, thank you, Eric. Eric, good to see you, by the way. I just, sorry, a bunch of donations came in because I said thank you or something. I don't know. I appreciate you all. I think what Xbox needs to do next with hardware is not talk about how it's the most powerful thing ever made. They just need to make a really solid piece of hardware. Yeah, and gaming news has been like dead. It's like nothing was happening. And then I'm putting out 2-3 videos a day like this whole week. I got sick with COVID. I'm finally over COVID. Now I have allergies or something. Who knows what's going on? But like, yeah, I don't know. I've made some changes in my personal life. Like I'm dieting and I'm trying to exercise because it was out of control. And the other thing I've been trying to figure out is how can I get back to a regular cadence of YouTube content while balancing being a dad and, you know, my IGN work and just doing all of that at once. Yeah, man, COVID like lingers, SOT Nest. And I'm sorry to go off and just sort of talk with chat for a second, but like it just sits there and it's like still there just a little bit. I hate it, man. It was really bad. And I haven't had a booster in like a year or something. Cause I'm just like, I'm fine. I got the initial shot, right? I'm all good. I want to get that booster. I was like a little wishy-washy about it. I kind of want to get it now. Cause basically if you go too long without getting a boost, I think you're basically unprotected. And it was tough. It was tough. It put me in the bed. Anyway, continuing on about Microsoft. Thank you for all the tips and donations. But yeah, I didn't lose flavor, thankfully. Continuing on. Microsoft and Activision have formed a new team within Blizzard to work on smaller AA games based on existing IP. Now, within this Jez Corden report, I read this. I think it's a great report from Jez. He even says that what's the first studio that pops in all of our minds and we think AA, making these smaller experimental titles? Oh, well, the team who made Hi-Fi Rush would be perfect for that. He said that that was actually considered, and the whole reason it didn't happen was because of their geographic location. We know that Xbox does not have a foothold in Japan, but when every time something gets shaky, you just bail on those territories. How are you ever going to get a foothold there? You're just not. Right? I mean, they tried it with the 360 era. They put out a few IPs. A lot of people talk about wanting remakes of not Blue Dragon, but the other one I talk about sometimes that came out around that time. And it just never happens. But anyway, this is interesting. It's an incubation project. And I'll just read the quotes that I had highlighted for the story. Our sources indicate that Microsoft and Activision have approved the creation of a new team within its Blizzard subsidiary, comprised mostly with employees from King. Blizzard is known for beloved franchises like Warcraft, StarCraft, Diablo, and Overwatch, and Microsoft is keen to curate and serve these franchises more prolifically than Activision itself did previously. Military sci-fi strategy series StarCraft, for example, has essentially been on mothballs since StarCraft remastered in 2017, and Xbox CEO Phil Spencer himself has name-checked StarCraft during interviews about the acquisition in recent years. Still, you need teams to work on these classic franchises, and that's exactly what Microsoft is gearing up to do. I don't know for sure. Let me look at something. No, it's not. Okay. I still have my StarCraft Brood War disc. I bought the treasure chest. StarCraft is one of my favorites. I would love for them to bring back StarCraft. And I do like the idea of them doing more with these franchises. To that end, we're told Microsoft and Activision's new team within Blizzard is tasked to work on AA smaller games based on existing franchises within the Blizzard universes. Given King's mobile expertise, it's possible that these will be mobile games aimed to support Xbox's planned mobile gaming store for iOS and Android, although we're not entirely sure that they'll be restricted specifically to mobile. Given Microsoft's platform agnostic strategy across mobile, PC, and console, it's entirely possible that any fresh projects could run across multiple platforms. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella recently described how it wants Xbox to focus on a three-pronged gaming approach across those endpoints, with Xbox console at its core. So, smaller, more nimble games. A lot of the biggest success stories in the industry in recent times have been unique ideas from smaller teams. Think of games like Balatro, Palworld, Vampire Survivors, Among Us, and even some of Microsoft's internal games like Sea of Thieves and Grounded. Like, the people that are allowed to be a little bit more experimental and try out new stuff have seen big success. And I am really curious to see what that means for Microsoft. Now, we talked about the hardware issues and the concerns that I have about hardware at the front of the show. We got into it a little bit. That's fine. But at the end of the day, Balatro is like a fake card game, to answer chat's question really quick. It's like it's a card game that was really popular, and I've heard a lot of things about it. I have not played it yet. I need to. I like the idea of them leveraging their IPs to make new stuff. And if you look, like, Genshin Impact runs on a phone, and it's like this massively successful gacha type game. Vampire Survivors could run on a phone, but it could also run on console. I think there's room here for them to have a little bit of wiggle room in terms of what they produce. And that does have me excited. Tom Warren also got an update about their mobile platform that they were talking about, because Sarah Bond said the mobile thing was supposed to be on the way. Where is the Xbox mobile store? Here's what Xbox said. Testing has begun for our browser-based mobile store, says Carrie Perez, head of Xbox Communications, in a statement to The Verge. Our work is progressing well, and we will have more to share in the future. So that's good, whatever the mobile store is going to be. I am kind of curious what is happening within that universe. And yeah. And the negative news is that they did raise the price of the Xbox Series X and S in Japan. Like, you can't get a foothold in Japan, and you raise the price significantly. You raise it from $59,978 to $66,978. My trick was always, what is it? You take off the last two numbers and you kind of get the US equivalent. So they moved it, they made it from $599 to $669 about. Let's just do it. Let's just actually get a currency calculator here. 1 second. Yen to USD. So 66,978. Yeah, it's $456. Previously, it was $59. Yeah, so it was $400, and now it's more. Yeah, they raised it. They raised it up like $50. So yeah, that's brutal. Microsoft says it regularly evaluates the impact of changes in market conditions on local pricing. They've been doing this all around the world, but it's just like, you know, I don't even really know what to say about it. It's just really unfortunate that Microsoft keeps having these challenges. Oh, a more positive note. Yeah, the yen is really struggling right now. I think that's why the Switch was delayed. I think they delayed the Nintendo Switch 2 because at this point, it just doesn't make a lot of business sense to have it release. They would lose more money if they released it at the time when they did. Positive note, Microsoft Gaming's ecosystem is 500 million monthly active users. I think that's a big W. That's good news for sure. And what was I going to talk about here? Oh, yeah. Just real quick, going back to I should have brought this up at the top of the show. Apparently, I missed some of these. I was going to close some of these steps because we're getting near the finale here. And I'm going to do a reacts. I have a good react set up here. Microsoft CFO Amy Hood says the company's device revenue will continue to decline next quarter in low to mid single digits. Windows OEM revenue should be relatively flat next quarter, in line with the PC market, according to Hood. They continued on. Xbox content and services revenue, which includes Xbox Game Pass, is up 61%. Without Xbox Activision Blizzard revenues, Xbox content and service revenues would have still been up 3% year over year. I think they're doing a great job, and that is great to hear, honestly. Philaroni says, I said this before, but I think this is the first gen ever we've seen prices on hardware go up. It's a massive first. Yeah, it's the wrong kind of first you want to see, Philaroni. You do not want to see these companies saying, hey, we really need to make you pay more, right? It's bad. Yeah, so Nintendo's slashing their hardware projections and they're selling less hardware. PlayStation selling less hardware and slashing their projections. Xbox is selling 42% less hardware. I just, I'm not trying to be doom and gloom. I know I was being accused of that at the top of the show. I just don't see a path forward to like hardware being the thing that really moves the needle for any of these companies. Tom Warren lays it out quite plainly here. Q1 hardware down 7%. Xbox hardware up 3% in the holiday quarter. Down 31, down 42. It's just like the hardware is bad. The hardware situation is really, really rough stuff. Top it all off. I mean, I'm not going to dive into it, but Call of Duty Black Ops 6 multiplayer maps are leaking. There's a massive Call of Duty leak. Not really much else to say there. I'm sort of like, how are y'all feeling about Call of Duty? Are you excited about the new Call of Duty? Like, I don't care what platform you play on, PC, console. I'm just curious about the game itself. I am so like, I kind of get caught up in that hype cycle for the new COD, and I'll check it out sometimes. but it goes away so quickly. Shark Cop says I am. Nope, I'm excited. Yeah, this one is the good one that everybody gets really hyped for. But yeah. And then I suppose this is the last like story that I was going to talk about. But THQ Nordic had a pretty notable live stream, and they had some really cool stuff revealed. I'm just going to go over the trailers that are listed. The Eternal Life of Goldman, sort of whatever. Disney Epic Mickey Rebrushed. This was a really celebrated Nintendo Wii game that has been remastered, I believe. Wreckfest 2. Wreckfest was really fun. So Wreckfest seemed pretty interesting. Titan Quest 2. I actually don't know what this one is. It's like an RTS. I don't know, man. Path of Exile 2 has won my heart. The Gothic 1 remake. This one is cool. So, gonna make me do we're not gonna do the date. The Gothic 1 remake looks really neat. Way of the Hunters, whatever. Little Nightmares 1 and 2. They're coming out with some new creepy story. And the new Darksiders was the big thing. So some pretty cool stuff that came out of the THQ thing. You can go check out all these trailers. I don't have them posted here. You can go to IGN. They're all on IGN if you want to see what is going on there. YouTube.com/IGN. Yeah, they got everything there basically. Also, Deadpool and Wolverine kind of blowing up. So that's been pretty crazy to watch. But now we're going to do a reacts. I haven't filmed the reacts in a while, and I thought this one was kind of interesting. I have no idea who this creator is, but apparently they have 1 million subscribers, and we're going to do a little reacts video to their content. Let me just see. Is it this one? It is that one. So this video is called How Greed Ruined Gaming. I don't watch these ahead of time, so let's see what happens.
Recently, Ubisoft dropped the world's first quadruple A game called Skull and Bones, and in true Ubisoft fashion, it kinda sucked.
You will see that Skull and Bones is a fully fledged game, he said. It's a very big game, and we feel that people will really see how vast and complete that game is. It's a really full quadruple A game that will deliver in the long run.
Guys, we promise that not only is this game real, but it's complete. And we did finish it. People are
the whole backlash for what's been going on with Ubisoft lately has been crazy to see. It does feel like Ubi is going to have a difficult year. I've seen the controversy surrounding Star Wars. I've seen the controversy surrounding AC Origins. I think both of those games are still going to sell very well. I think they're going to sell just absolutely fine, even with the controversy, because like most people don't follow Twitter.
really going to see that we did finish the game, and that's how good it is. It's not a little secret that big studio...
We finished the game. Good job, Ubisoft. You finished making the game for 10 years.
Those are dropping big stinky poop out of their butts for $60 or even $70 now. In the past decade, it seems there's been a trend of AAA games releasing in unplayable states. The game is broken, buggy, or even unplayable. Remember when they used to make games...
Do you remember when I basically made the same video and everybody hated me? Like, the thing about the whole Baldur's Gate video that drives me crazy, it's like, what was I advocating for? Complete games at launch. That's it. Like, that's the whole video. And like, everybody lost their minds over it. And I'm like, am I really like, do you really think like I'm up to something more than the same thing I've been saying for a decade? Like, come on. The first video on this channel is about not spending money on microtransactions.
Games that worked upon release. Remember when releasing a game meant that it was done? You'd think if a game is ready to be purchased by millions that it should be in working condition, right? Right, guys? I'm gonna need to get out my exercise ball and green screen for this one.
I swear if I get flagged for the music in this thing, like if the whole stream gets demonetized because she played music, I hate it when that happens. Come on, YouTube.
This isn't gonna work very well. AAA studios are so caught up in overworking their employees to launch a non-working game that everyone hates that they spent $70 on, riddled with predatory microtransactions after you've already purchased the full game. And they don't see how much that hurts their franchises in the long run, because their current model is designed for maximum profit and
Yeah. Well, she's getting at the heart of like what the real issue is and what the real problem is happening with video game design these days. They're being led by people that only care about money. The people in the trenches, the people making the product, they want to make a good product, but they are caught up in a cycle of having leaders that are like, oh, well, you got to put the microtransactions. You got to like tarnish your game and reputation by adding these predatory practices, because like that's just what the business calls for now. And like everybody is just like, yeah, they're right. Like they're caught up in the idea that has to happen, and then these other games come along that don't have any of that. And like, was Baldur's Gate 3 perfect at launch? No, it absolutely was not. But at the same time, they worked to make it better. The No Man's Sky team worked to make it better, and seeing that happen is not the norm. The norm is game comes out, doesn't really work, doesn't get the support it needs. One thing about CDPR is they largely fixed all versions of Cyberpunk except those base consoles. They're still kind of whatever. Yeah, the problem is profit is at the forefront.
not maximum enjoyment of consumers. Isn't that counterintuitive? 2K started putting ads in the game after you already bought it.
It's
Hello?
insane.
Oh, this hurts my butt. Cyberpunk released with game-breaking glitches because it wasn't done. But despite not being ready, delaying the release by another year would
I had that
piss
same bug.
shareholders and investors off, so they decided that this was the best financial decision for them, regardless if the game was done. So they figured, hey,
I think Cyberpunk's an easy target, but they fixed it. So is it okay that they release in that state? No. Did they put in the work to fix it? Yes. And I played the PC version. I still think the PC version was pretty great.
hey, some profits is better than none, am I right, guys? Hey, who gives a fuck if this type of shit happened?
The problem wasn't every version of Cyberpunk releasing. It was largely the fact that the base console version just wasn't functional. That was more of the problem than a lot of it. Granted, there were a lot of problems on like PS5. The PlayStation like removed it, but most of the really bad stuff was attributed to last gen consoles.
Currently, the game apparently works great now. They've fixed many of the bugs and
She got to
everything,
it.
but it's too little too late in my opinion. You get a reputation for doing that sort of thing. Diablo 4, I couldn't even play couch co-op without glitches that made the game completely unplayable. There was no option to just
That was
play
bad.
offline locally for no reason, so we couldn't even enjoy our Chad Eddie Burback warrior roleplay. I ended up uninstalling the game after several tries over several days, and never played again, which I don't understand. We solved online multiplayer roleplay like 20 years ago.
It's RuneScape, right? I don't know if RuneScape is the best example. Didn't they just get busted like making statistically impossible drops be present in their game?
Greed is such a driving factor for why so many people just hate AAA gaming now. And it's hard to
I agree
deny.
with that.
Ubisoft's CEO spouted how you shouldn't expect to own the games that you buy. As in, gaming will be a service. If you don't own the game you buy,
Yeah,
it can
Caleb.
be taken away, modified, patched. You spent money on a product you don't own, which is just terrible and also explains why Diablo has no option to play offline. When servers go down, then what? When Tony Hawk's Pro
You're right, it
Skater
was
5
MapleStory.
released in 2015, the full game was actually just a modified demo disc that only had the first level on it and then authorization that allowed you to download the rest of the game to your console. They did this because they didn't have time to print the full game disc, and when servers for the game went offline, buying the full game disc now does nothing. It's pathetic. And that's on top of how the game just didn't release in a playable state.
Yeah. Oh god, they're gonna talk about John Riccatello. It's gonna be bad. Jeez. Mike, I'm just gonna ban you. Like, why are you here? Go away. long story short, like these practices are largely what people are really fed up with. They just want functional products at launch. And like Baldur's Gate 3 was pretty solid until you got to like, what was it, Act 3, which was pretty janky. But that got it got optimized. So there were problems with a lot of the games that were coming out in this time period. And I don't know when this video came out, but she's getting to the point about how profit margins are becoming too much of a focus. And that sucks. It just sort of ruins everything.
Petition, the former CEO
This
of
guy's
EA,
terrible.
notoriously greedy company, and who is now the current CEO of Unity, in 2011 proposed a
Nah, he's gone, right? Yeah, he's gone.
model that would charge players real money to refill their ammo in online multiplayer shooters like Battlefield. This scumbag was partly responsible for expanding the popularity of microtransactions in games, and even proposed to charge gamers per bullet fired in games. He said, "When you are 6 hours into playing Battlefield and you run out of ammo in your clip and we ask you for $1 to reload, you're really not that price sensitive in that point in
It's just insane that these people say these things and they're just like, yeah, how can we just monetize the crap out of these games? And profit margin has become too enticing of an incentives. It's really unfortunate. It just sucks. It's just corporate greed has gotten in the way of the people that actually care about making wonderful games.
time. Since
And just like a recent example is Bungie, Pete Parsons saying we're going to make 45% more revenue than we actually can make. And then they have to fire all these people. Like, it feels awful for the people who are still at the company. It feels awful for the people who had to leave the company, obviously. And like, their whole lives are messed up. And it just gives a whole feeling, an unsettling feeling of the whole industry, because the people leading are talking about charging $1 per bullet. Like, get these people away from video games. It's so problematic. Like, say what you will about Phil Spencer. I think at his heart, he cares about making fun games that people want to play. He allows companies the freedom to sort of experiment. I'm actually really glad that someone like Herman Hulst is up there at the top, because he made games, he plays games, he talks about games. Like, people who are actually invested in what makes games great. I want to see more of those people in leadership positions. So, like, why have I been less hard on Sony lately? Because the leadership change and the tumultuous period we're in right now, it's right now happening. And hopefully we come out on the other side with people that are just, they really, really care about gaming.
he's now the CEO of Unity, a popular game engine for indie devs.
He's gone.
In 2023, John ripped me
This video was made 3 months ago, but I think Riccatello's done. I think he quit Unity.
off. Cello introduced a pricing system that would charge devs each time someone installs their game. That's on top of already paying thousands of dollars a year to use Unity. That's like if Adobe charged me every time I uploaded a video on top of already paying them $50 a month. Not even
Didn't Adobe actually talk about doing that? That's the scary thing. Riccatello is not the only one talking about stuff like that.
Even they are that greedy. That's how greedy this guy is. There's more specifics to the pricing, but this absolutely kills projects.
Don't quote me on the Adobe thing.
Especially ones meant to be free. This dude is a villain to the industry, and I don't know how he became the CEO of another company to ruin. It's just really sad the direction that modern gaming is taking, with not only these greedy CEOs, but going for massive games in terms of scale and file size. There's absolutely no reason that Modern Warfare needs to be over 200 gigabytes. Being
yeah, that's
buggy
crazy.
and unplayable, but also uninspired. In the era of every single thing needing to be a remake, this era of large companies prioritizing doing what's safe and pleasing shareholders leads to the same games with less and less.
I kind of want to disagree with some of the points that she's making here. I think there are instances of games trying the same thing. I don't think Sonic Frontiers was an example of Sonic doing the same thing yet again. It was like an open world game. They tried some things that were different. And out of all the companies that receive a lot of criticism, I would say CDPR for for all things considered, and I can't believe I'm saying this, they came out with a really excellent DLC for Cyberpunk. They've moved on to work on other IP, and if the worst thing they ever did was the Cyberpunk thing, which they worked very hard to correct and fix, and hopefully they've learned their lesson about. I hope that's like the one big blemish they have on their record, because everything else they've done has been pretty damn good, if you ask me. So like, yes, they deserve criticism for it, but at the same time, like, they made The Witcher 3, they made Cyberpunk 2077 and eventually would fix it. Should it be complete at launch? Absolutely. And I hope we never see anything like that from CDPR. But yeah, Edge Runners, like, widely celebrated. So also Call of Duty has tried some different things. Call of Duty, I don't think it's that they're doing the same thing. I think it's that they're getting kind of cheap with how they do their campaigns. So yeah, just my thoughts.
Content being released over and over again at an expensive cost. Sure, a big game staying $60 for several decades technically means games have gotten cheaper over time due to inflation. $60 in 1996 has the same buying power as $120 today. That's like twice the price. But really? Modern Warfare 2? Again? Really? Modern Warfare 3? Again? Do you know how difficult it is searching for things when they just didn't change the name of the new game? This drives me insane. They could have released Modern Warfare 2, or Modern Warfare 3, 2. The remake. Just give me something. Instead of innovation in gameplay and discovering new ways to optimize games through...
Man, N64 era was really good because it was the first time, like, Mario 64 really pushed forward the entire industry. I feel like Mario 64 showed people a new style of designing a game, and, you know, Legend of Zelda at that time also, that people maybe hadn't processed or conceived before, and it gave birth to like a whole new genre and just new ways of storytelling, like Metal Gear on the PlayStation 1. And I think part of the problem is with modern gaming, we are never going to see an innovation like that. The innovations we see right now are like games like Fortnite, where you make one world and then you mess up the world and people live in it forever. I just never think we'll see like the Super Nintendo to N64 swap again. And even from N64 to like the 360 era, PS2, like, hitting the PS2, the 360, all that, we're never going to see that jump. There will never be a graphical jump. There's never going to be a piece of tech that comes along again. And that's why, you know, console sales aren't selling as well as they do, because people, like, we're at this point with graphics where I don't know can they really get that much better? They're also like, what's the next step? Photorealism? And most people don't really want photorealism games. Like, you want a little bit of an element of fantasy there. I don't know. I think we're at a really difficult time in terms of technology because we won't see that jump. Sorry to go off on a tangent.
Through creativity and how they manipulated memory to fit on the tiny 64 megabyte cartridges of the N64.
Yeah, you know what's really funny about that, actually? Oftentimes the constraints that we're presented with as creative people or like as developers are presented with, it actually ends up becoming a strength. And they find new ways to make their visions come to life, and it actually ends up becoming charming and interesting. And now that they have everything, and like games aren't optimized, they just like say, oh, we'll just DLSS it with the NVIDIA tech. But there's a craft that's being lost there. And I think that's unfortunate.
Now we have juggernaut games that have no business being over 100 gigabytes, which I just find ridiculous. Like, did you even try optimizing anything?
Yeah.
Why is Fortnite 90 gigabytes? Why? Why is 2K now consistently over 100 gigabytes? That's just a side note that's always pissed me off. But studios are clearly getting sloppy in exchange for time and money. Why?
Yeah, and what I'm, you know, she's making the same point with file size. But it's just like, you had constraints back in the day. you don't have constraints now. And we're seeing just like garbage optimization of these games in terms of performance, like the frame rate's not stable, the frame timing's not stable, the textures are loading in weird. They're using shader compilation that pulls from the web or some nonsense. Like a lot of the technology that they're utilizing now, it's just like they don't even try, it feels like. They just say, turn DLSS on and call it a day. And I do miss the days where there was a little bit more of an attempt to do that. You know who does do really cool stuff with optimization, who I love? Insomniac. Insomniac is like at the cusp of tech all the time. They're pushing the boundaries of their engine. They're optimizing, they're pushing and pulling the levers. And it's really, really cool to see. Yeah, and here comes Nintendo running games off a toaster and like trouncing PlayStation and Xbox and PC, who have basically unlimited storage.
I wait a few more years to put out a beautiful, working, exceptional title like Zelda Breath of the Wild, when you could just pump out a Pokemon game every year in worse and worse condition, and make an even more exorbitant amount of cash. Vast open world with nothing interesting to look for or find, just to call it open world. And sure, many games do this well, but maybe focus on a great gameplay experience before just jumping into the open world trend. Because games that release in unplayable conditions mostly end up with a quickly dwindling player base.
Yeah, we're just going to be, we'll be there soon. No worries.
Yeah, you never get a second chance to make a good first impression. That's like a saying that I was taught growing up. And unfortunately, with a lot of these games, they come out, they're not optimized, they don't work, they run poorly, they put out their Twitter statement on a yellow or black background with the text on it saying, we're sorry we screwed up. It's just like, what happened to the days when you had to make sure that you passed cert and your game ran because you didn't get another chance at that first impression? Too much reliance on day zero and day one patches. It needs to change. That idea needs to be adjusted.
Worries. Yep. Off the B flag. It's around this direction. Yep.
Yeah. This game was like a mess.
Yep. I think we're going the right way.
That couldn't play when there was hype around the game and never stuck with it or opened it again due to the sour taste it left in their mouths. Even if the developers fixed some bugs and glitches post-release. Like taking a delicious pie out of the oven before it's done, so it's just like hot, soupy egg that might give you salmonella. There's a reason games like Red Dead 2 and GTA 5 have a dedicated fan base to this day, playing online and solo. Even if you need to pick up
GTA Online didn't work great at launch. You couldn't get in, servers were unstable, you would get booted all the time. Like GTA Online is actually not a great example of something that just worked at launch. It works now. GTA 5, the campaign worked right, but when multiplayer launched, it wasn't sunshine and rainbows.
Up each can of beans one at a time. Rockstar did something right, and it's
Red Dead's phenomenal.
Releasing a game that's done. The bar is on the ground. But first, a short commercial break with today's video sponsor, Factor. Factor is a meal delivery service with
Hey Factor, you sponsored me one time.
meals that are
what
ready
happened?
in just 2. Now back to the video. But in the wake of AAA studios losing trust and consistency in the eyes of the consumers, while still pocketing so much money anyway, so who cares? There are games that are trying something unique and fun and capture that same childlike wonder, like
Yeah, they're all the small games. And you know what? Guess what? When you allow creatives to be creative and try new stuff, you get big hits. Vampire Survivors. We just talked about it with the Microsoft story where Sea of Thieves, Grounded, Vampire Survivors, Balaltro or whatever, Helldivers 2. There's just like these experiences like, hey, this is really refreshing and unique and cool.
Discovering you can chuck the baby penguin off the side of the map in Mario 64. And those are the rise of indie games.
Pal World. Yeah.
PlayStation Plus is a service where you pay yearly to get access to a huge library of games. Some older classics and lots of indie
Or Xbox
games.
Game
I started
Pass, of course.
exploring the vast library of really cool indie games after deciding I didn't want to play Far Cry 3 for the 5th time. Nor did I want to experience the 10 Assassin's Creed games on here. So I started with just downloading whatever I thought looked cool, and it started with this really cool looking Chrono Trigger inspired
Sea of Stars is great.
JRPG,
Sea of Stars was day one on Game Pass. Well, he's a PlayStation gamer, that's fine, but like for only $19.99.
Stars. Made me cry. Excellent game, and won Best Indie Game of 2023.
It's really good.
Then I discovered Tinykin, a game that outshined
I've heard
Pikmin
good
4
things
in
about this.
every single way, in my opinion. The world is really fun to traverse, and the platforming gameplay is really well paced and extremely fun. It's not as sluggish as Pikmin 4. Moonlighter is a really cool game where you manage a shop by day and go battle dungeons for materials to sell by night. And of course,
Yeah, just real quick aside here again, I don't mean to keep interrupting her, but I think we're seeing this newfound love for indie games because it's become very apparent to the people that are playing these games that AAA, they care to a point, but at some point they need to make their money. And indie games, they feel like they're doing it for the love of the craft. And I think people are really wising up to that idea. AAA has been sort of messy for a few years now, and every once in a while we get a great AAA game. Like God of War Ragnarok was an amazing game. Elder Scrolls is amazing. All the Zeldas were great. But we have these problematic launches, and it's just like, how is this happening time and time and time again? I think we're going to see a big shift in terms of what is being created and the level of polish that we get over the next few years, because they've kind of got their hands caught in the cookie jar, so to speak. And people are just like, yeah, here's what's going to happen. We're not going to buy your game. We're not going to play it anymore. We're not going to support it. We're out. And that's what's going to happen.
Of course, those dungeons get harder and the materials get more expensive. And in the same vein, I was introduced to an older game, Enter the Gungeon, a bullet hell
that's a good one.
roguelike that is extremely fun, replayable, and has a
Just a
pretty
little
solid
bit.
couch co-op. And guess what? You can buy all 4 of these games at full price for 1.5 AAA games. And indie games, especially on Steam, go on sale constantly. While writing this, almost all these games are on sale. And yet, Skyrim is still $60 on every platform for over a decade. Back in my day, AAA games used to go on sale for $40 after a year. And it's not like these games are much shorter to justify the cheaper cost by any means. The hours at least I put into them are pretty similar to what I put into AAA titles as well.
Sea of Stars. I didn't play a ton of Sea of Stars, for full disclosure. It has no right to be as good as it is. It's like AAA quality. It's fantastic. I can't believe that game is like part of ID at Xbox, part of what it is. Yeah, here I'll link to the video at the end here once I finish watching.
Well, of course, there are stinkers and masterpieces that live in both indie and AAA worlds, but people are certainly noticing a trend that these giant studios not putting out finished games does not cater well to the price point, and, well, the fact that they're not indie studios. Hey, don't you have hundreds of employees working on this, and it still doesn't...
Yeah, you don't really get a pass if you work in AAA. You're charging premium prices. You should be getting a premium product. You don't get a pass. I know making games are hard, but it's just like, you're asking me to spend $70 to $120. Like Star Wars Outlaws, what's the price? It's $120 right now. Okay. You think people are just going to give you the pass for like the graphic quality that's in that game, or like weird gameplay elements and things like that? Like, I like Julian Garrity's games of the past, and I like Ubisoft games. I'm going to play Star Wars Outlaws. I'm going to play Assassin's Creed. But like, you think the general audience is just like going to say, yeah, sure, what is $120? Money is tight for everyone right now. This stuff is important to people. Like, you're not some small studio. You're one of the big studios.
Meet the bare minimum expectations. The fact that many big game studios have garnered a terrible workplace reputation, not limited to overworking, unpaid...
Oh yeah, and then to top it all off, the big AAA publisher is making the people in the trenches put out the worst sorry statements, so they just get absolutely dunked on. And that's after months of being crunched and like squished into like these timetables that the executives have made up so that they can, you know, get their microtransaction profit margin out the it's so problematic. And like I've actually been really happy about all the unionization that I've seen. I've always been fairly indifferent about unions. Like I do not see another recourse for a lot of these AAA companies to do anymore. Like the employees are fed up and they're like, look, you've treated us like garbage for like 2 decades. We're just going to unionize because what other options do we have? You had your chance to treat us right. You didn't. Time to unionize, everybody.
Overtime and sexual harassment, that could be an entirely new video. I'm mainly going after the suits, single-handedly ruining the modern state of gaming by the
I think we can think of a few more to add to our list.
the power of pure greed. I'm aware there are more than passionate devs on these teams that want to see the hard work they've done be something they're proud of. I also want to clarify I'm not talking about games with a few bugs here and there, too. No one expects a game with 0 bugs and releases absolutely perfect. The ones I'm talking about are the ones clearly unfinished and rushed, and which bugs make the game unenjoyable or entirely unplayable. There's a reason the guy that made Roller Coaster Tycoon by himself is regarded as a god among indie developers. He made this game in an archaic programming language even for the time it was released.
Wait, what language is that? That looks like Pascal? Is that Pascal? All right, sorry. Real quick, I'm a programming nerd. Was Roller Coaster Tycoon made in Pascal? What? Just C? It was written in assembly. Holy. And then C? So C or assembly? Sorry. No, Pascal is like what they code cash registers with.
In 1999. Roller Coaster Tycoon has an impressive feat of almost not having any bugs in the game, and during a time where you needed much support of a team to create and release a game. During
That's
this
nuts.
time, making a game by yourself or even with a small team was not super accessible. AAA studios dominated the landscape and said, here, this is what we got for you, and that's it. These are your only options here. And back then, the expectation was that it was done. Because after release, they couldn't rely on post-release patches and updates through the internet like they
Yeah, and you know what? I talked about it at the beginning, and Laura Fryer, who I did the reaction to, she pointed to this. She used to work at Xbox. She talked about the 360 era. She talked about Gears of War and getting that off the ground. She's been a major influence in the games industry. She talked about this reliance on day 0 and day 1 and how it's resulting in worse products. The whole purpose of having the ability to do this was to make games better, not make it a crutch so that you can release unfinished things and then patch it. Like, so I'm glad she brought this up in her video too. Because I have talked about this on the channel and how it's problematic.
they do today. When there were patches, they mostly used to physically ship out newer copies of the game. And this has affected things like speedrunning and tournament gameplay and games like Wii Sports and Melee, where different versions of the game matter. In Wii Sports, one version of Wii Baseball doesn't have this cutscene at the start of the game, and the other version does. In speedrunning, changes like this can be crucial to saving time. Yes, the PS2 and that generation of consoles had internet connectivity, but developers couldn't rely on everyone having decent internet and the physical adapter needed, and it wasn't a super reliable way to install updates to fix bugs. Unlike now,
Again, snubbing the Xbox in her content. She's clearly a PlayStation gamer. That's fine. But she's making the point that I made earlier in the video. It's become a crutch. And are we glad they're there? Yeah, sure. But remember when games came out and they had to work? Like, now they don't even need to work. That's insane.
where a significant portion of gamers have internet because the landscape has shifted from purchasing physical copies of a game to downloading it on your computer. And if your computer can't handle the 90 gigabyte Fortnite file, then fuck you. You don't deserve to
Language.
play. Yet another reason to cherish physical copies of media. I'm rewatching Inuyasha for the 5th time, and the season 6 intro song is once again removed from Hulu, and it upsets me dearly. If I had the physical copy of this, it could have been preserved, but now I just have to like play it side by side on YouTube every time I watch an episode. Like, if Nintendo could have patched games in the Nintendo 64 era, they would have destroyed Mario 64 glitches. And it would have been even more difficult to get your hands on a version of the game where you could perform things like the backwards long jump.
Yeah.
But then, everything changed when the internet attacked. I'm the face, not Pikachu. Hello? Yes! As the internet became more accessible, reliable, and better in every household, unless you have Spectrum, of course, game development also became
I actually don't think that Nintendo has really changed their strategy with patches too much. Like, I think the Zeldas... Oh, no, they patched out the sword glitch and stuff like that. So, like, if you have the base version of Zelda, I duplicated the Master Sword. So, like, I never want to update that because if I do, it'll mess everything up. But there are ways to still get those base versions. She does make a good point, though. So, yeah.
became more accessible and feasible for indie devs. You don't need the internet to code, obviously, but now you could work with a team easier online, share code, game assets, engines, tools, and the internet really allowed for community-driven indie development. In the early 2010s, we saw Minecraft and Terraria become increasingly popular. In 2015, we got Undertale and this song. In 2016, we saw also the pinnacle of indie gaming and the face of video game music playlists on YouTube, Stardew Valley, also famously made by a guy. It's undeniable how massive these indie games got, and how massive of a community these games still have. And I feel
Yeah, what was the other game on Xbox? The Fox game. You know the one I'm talking about. Good game.
like that was really the start of this change of tide for gaming as a whole. The
like
way
Zelda.
we consume games is so different than 20 years ago, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. And while I'm disappointed at a lot of the changes, I'm really happy and excited to see the good changes. Like this game called Minami Lane was made by a couple in 6 months, and it's awesome, and
Dungeons
I love
and
it, and I
Hinterberg.
highly recommend
Tunic,
this
thank
one
you.
for cozy gamers. I feel like I have access to so many different types of games than I
Silk
ever
Song.
did. At my fingertips,
Hollow
with low
Knight.
risk and low commitment pricing. I'd say 2020 saw a huge shift in gaming. With large studios putting production on hold, that left a gap for some heater multiplayer indie titles to
Yeah, now they're laying a ton of people off. I think we are going to see this huge swell of indie game studio come up out of nowhere because, yeah, it's just been too long. And with Unreal and the ease of development, like I'll open Unreal after I watch this video, but I downloaded a free dragon asset and I was trying to do size comparisons for Game of Thrones. And I basically made a little game with a bunch of dragons in it. It took me like an hour. So if I can make some pile of garbage, imagine what somebody who actually cares about game development and learning how to do it can do by spending, you know, a couple of years in the engine. They've made some really incredible things. And I think we're going to see some really cool stuff in the next several years. Black Myth Wukong is a good example of a game where, you know, this creative team gets together, they're putting together a game in China and they're doing it on Unreal and it looks absolutely phenomenal. I think it's cool.
drop onto the scene, like Among Us. Honestly, I feel like the Among Us craze forever changed how and what games content creators stream and play, and thus propel the popularity of. I'm probably biased because I am a content creator, but the ecosystem of indie gaming has changed so much, even with the landscape of streaming and content creators.
I've thought about it.
I know
Marble.
Minecraft
I just
isn't
don't
an
have time.
indie game anymore, but think about how much it propelled in popularity during the Minecraft YouTuber era.
Yeah.
And now a lot of these creators are being outed as sexual assaulters. Moving on. Phasmophobia saw this, Lethal Company, Party Animals, and now this new game, Content Warning, all focused on really fun multiplayer
Content
gameplay
Warning, yeah.
for a really affordable price. If not free. The price and eyeballs make these games that much more accessible to people of all ages. The goal? Get as many people to download this game as possible. Content Warning was free for the first 24 hours it was on Steam, and it saw 6 million downloads during this time. And after that, it's only $8. I don't want to harp on pricing too much because I don't think it's a giant factor in all this. You know, it does boil down to like corporate greed, but like it is a factor when you consider how indie devs don't necessarily have the same resources that big studios have in terms of marketing and reach. I mean, Content Warning is a game where you literally are a YouTuber, and the goal is to film spooky stuff and go viral. This game was made for people to play on stream and make content around, and it's so much fun, on or offline. This is so painful.
Make us the hell we
I
deserve.
don't think they even know where it is. No? Okay, which way? Camera, where? This way?
Speaking of the massive online community indie games have, we have
Fez,
creators
yeah.
like Game Maker's Toolkit, who first of all makes really cool informational videos about game design, and Dunkey, who host community game jams, where people make and submit a game in just 48 hours based on the set theme. In 2020,
Yeah, you know, there's there's the game jam scene. There's tons of tutorials that you can find online. Somebody in chat mentioned Kingdom Bridge of Spirits, only 12 developers. I'm so happy to see this because there are people out there that really care about making cool stuff. And it's really heartening to see, honestly. And it unties itself from the messy corporation structures that a lot of the devs who we've grown up, you know, knowing and being fans of are caught up in now, where they're like, oh, well, we have to have microtransactions in our games because that's how the industry does it. And I push back against that. I think that is the solution, the only solution that they have managed to come up with. But does that truly mean they're necessary? Maybe you could not spend as much on your marketing. Marketing takes up literally half the budget of a lot of games, if not more. Like it's just insane to me. So I think there are other solutions, and I don't buy some executive telling me that microtransactions need to be in the game. I just don't.
2023, Game Maker's Toolkit's Game Jam saw over 20,000 entries of
Yeah, and like what type of game are they trying to copy? They're trying to copy Vampire Survivors. It's like,
Of course, these are not all full games, but all really cool ideas, which are truly impressive to see done and thought out so quickly and cleverly. Rollerdrome is a game that was first conceived at GMTK's first Game Jam, and in 2022 was released as a fully fledged, award-winning 3D arcade shooter.
I'm pretty sure the studio shut down, unfortunately.
This gets a cool out of 10 from me. By the way, don't forget to subscribe so we can hit 1 million subscribers. My mom told me to remind people throughout my video.
Don't quote me on the Roller Dome thing, but I remember something about that not being great.
So here I am. You're welcome, Mom. Bouncing off of that, Steam and PlayStation Plus changed how we buy games. With the ongoing sales, releasing games in beta for basically free playtesting, games are just more accessible now than they ever used to be for everyone involved. And our library of games has ever expanded. And yet I'm still playing the same fucking game from 2001. And yes,
That's a problem. That is one problem with the AAA market. I do think we're at a saturation point. Does everybody still want to play another Assassin's Creed? So like, I think it's a little bit, there's a little bit of a problem there. There are other games competing in that genre. There's other games that are doing things better. So like, yeah, I don't know.
actively dislike Ubisoft's greed, but am subscribed to PSN or PS Plus for the sole reason that PS Plus is not only much cheaper, but offers a much wider selection
And I'll say it again, and Game Pass.
of games from a variety of publishers. Ubisoft's does not and is $18 a month. So many of us have played such a variety of games that maybe at least my expectation when I've played so many great indie games that just work upon release versus big titles that are just broken or empty just feels extra disappointing. On top of remembering the ingenuity that went into a really cool gaming experience when everyone was just figuring this whole gaming thing out. Boo, wah, back in my day, gaming used to be good, now everything is shit. Wah, 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 you little baby, why you little baby, huh? That's not entirely true, and that's not what I'm trying to say. Gaming in general is like objectively better now as a whole. Have you
That's
actually
true.
tried to go back and play some of those games on the original console? The cameras are jarring and make it borderline unplayable. And I
That's
know
all
it's going to
true.
be a controversial thing to say, but maybe I'm just used to the camera controls that we figured out for this century. And yes, I love these games from the bottom of my heart. I promise you that. My other friend is also playing Kingdom Hearts from the beginning and just wow.
Uh-oh.
Yeah,
Uh-oh.
it's-
Oh my
it's hard.
gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh, but if you don't do anything, you just don't. It doesn't matter.
I mean, This is quality gameplay right here. Just take your nostalgia goggles off for a moment. It's not as black and white as just like, oh, older games were better. I'm gonna get so much shit for saying that. I'm not sorry to the Kingdom Hearts fans out there. That shit is raw. So like many things in this world, it's a spooky gray area with nuance. You can argue that gaming is both better and worse than before. And I really just wanted to kind of write like this love letter to all the cool indie games I've found in the past couple years and recognize the impact they've made on my life.
I just wanted her video, like it started with a point about how greed has ruined gaming, and it sort of ended talking about how indie games are great. I don't really get the through line. I think the conclusion's a little weak, but the rest of her video I totally get. Maybe she's about to wrap it up, but I'm a little bit lost about the point that she's making at the moment.
Internet landscape and how the good ones are so full of passion and fun and aim to do what they do really well instead of going for a vast open world I want to be everything type of game that ends up just being kind of mid. I
should have let her talk for 2 more seconds. The point that she's trying to make is basically that there's too much of a focus on being everything to everyone instead of just being the good game. And like, that's my interpretation of what she's saying. I actually agree with that. I think they're trying to tick too many boxes in the AAA space. And it's just like, God, there was somebody who did a speech about this basically where they said something along the lines of, you need to know what you're making. I don't care if you have Twitch integration and all these bells and whistles and all of the check marks. What is the game you're making? That's the first thing that you should be considering, not what cool, like, do you use AI as an example in your development process? Who cares? What do you want to make? That's the core of what should be being asked. And she hits the nail on the head.
I hope this encourages you to go check out some of the indie games that I recommended. Please, someone else play these games, and if you have, please comment below. I really want to hear your experiences with them. Like I say when I'm procrastinating doing literally anything important by gaming, born to game, forced to work.
I've never seen this content before. I have no idea who Gabrielle is. So I've never heard of Gabrielle, but that was kind of a cool video. Gabby Bell. She has 1 million subs. I don't know how I've never heard of that person. But anyway, here's a link to the video. Really, really good stuff. And absolutely understand where she's coming from. I'm going to subscribe. Like, yeah, definitely subscribe to that channel. I haven't heard of Gabby Bell, but I really like that video. That was cool. It looks like she covers a variety of stuff. Like she reviewed Gordon Ramsay's masterclass. I don't know if she usually talks about gaming, but that one was good. Interesting stuff to think about. I think my biggest problem with the AAA space, it's not the devs. It's not the people that are in the trenches trying to make a good product. It's the whole economic system that they're set up within, because it feels like leadership only cares about the profit margins and they don't care about the product. And there's too vast of a disconnect between those two things, right? They're too far apart, and there needs to be some sort of middle ground where the business realities can meet the creative realities. And I think it's skewed way too far in one direction. Anyway, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell. If you are not subscribed yet, hit that like button if you are already subscribed. Thank you so much to the members for supporting. Thank you to everybody who donated, by the way, on this stream. I do appreciate it. And a big thank you to the members. If you want to become a member, you can click that join button right down there. I think I'm going to sign off for the day. I greatly appreciate y'all watching. I have some other stuff that I want to get done, like eating lunch. I am starving, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll see you for the next one. We took a lot of twists and turns today, but I greatly appreciate you watching. Bye for now, everybody, and I'll see you for the next one soon.